Chapter 1688. Open the 9 colored pupils again. The fat cat suddenly looked at Rui Qianyu and immediately understood. The latter had actually opened the 9 colored pupils again in her grief. The 8th pupil, the 9 colored pupils, had 9 different colors and needed to be opened 1 pupil at a time. Rui Qianyu's eyes flickered, and her pupils turned into a dark green color. It was very strange. This is the green pupils. The fat cat looked at Rui Qianyu and exclaimed. The latter had opened the green pupils of the 9 colored pupils. Rui Qianyu's eyes widened slightly, and then a green light was released. It enveloped Nie Tian and directly entered his body. What a powerful life force! The fat cat was stunned as it felt the powerful life force. It was rumored that the 9 colored pupils had 9 pupils, and each pupil represented a different attribute. The red pupil represented the power of fire, the blue pupil represented the power of ice, the black pupil represented the power of darkness, and so on. The green pupils that Rui Qianyu had opened now represented the power of the myriad wood attribute. This was a powerful life force. The moment the myriad wood energy entered Nie Tian's body, a miraculous scene happened. The wounds on Nie Tian's body began to heal quickly, and the torn meridians in his body also slowly recovered. As the power of wood surged into Nie Tian's body, his almost depleted life force rapidly grew stronger. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian, who had been on the verge of death, started to show signs of life. The myriad wood energy can stimulate a warrior's life force. It's really magical. The fat cat saw this scene and couldn't help but tremble as it muttered. The myriad wood energy didn't directly provide the warrior with life force, but stimulated the warrior's own life force. Nie Tian's life force was already very strong, and with the supreme dragon bloodline and the stellar energy, his life force was even stronger than an overgod warrior. The power of the 10,000 wood had stimulated Nie Tian's own life force, allowing his shattered martial body to instantly recover. When Rui Qianyu saw that the power of 10,000 wood had an effect on Nie Tian, her eyes surged with even more green power, pouring into Nie Tian's body. The life force in Nie Tian's body became even more violent, and the damaged meridians in his body were instantly healed. Nie Tian's consciousness instantly became clear, and his twisted face returned to normal. At this time, Nie Tian felt the blood in his body start to boil, as if there was a power that was constantly surging. All of a sudden, the fat cat screamed as if it had found something unbelievable. The 3 evil sword mark is merging with Nie Tian's blood. The fat cat didn't see wrongly. The 3 evil sword mark was merging with Nie Tian's blood. How is this possible? The fat cat confirmed this point, and its cat face was petrified. It couldn't believe what it was seeing at all. It originally estimated that if Nie Tian could withstand the 3 evil sword mark, the best result would be that he could absorb some of the power of the 3 evil sword mark and increase his strength. But now, the 3 evil sword mark was actually merging with Nie Tian's blood. Nie Tian wasn't a member of the 3 evils family, and there were no other sword marks in his body. How could he merge the 3 evils sword mark into his blood? This was too strange. Is the 3 evils sword mark going to merge with Nie Tian's blood and give birth to a new bloodline power? The fat cat screamed, its body trembling. At this time, Nie Tian felt that his blood was boiling. It was crazily absorbing the power of the 3 evils sword mark, and transforming this power into a new bloodline power. Realizing this, Nie Tian couldn't help but change his expression. He was shocked. As the power of thousands of woods kept surging in Nie Tian's body, it stimulated his blood to boil, and the 3 evil sword mark merged with his blood faster and faster. After a while, the 3 evil sword mark disappeared completely, and merged with Nie Tian's blood. At this moment, Nie Tian felt indescribably comfortable. The power in his body was bursting, as if he had endless power. He suddenly opened his eyes and stood up directly. His entire body released a powerful sword aura. His sharp aura looked down on the world. Nie Tian suddenly felt that there was something wrong with the momentum around him. Then, he realized something. His eyes trembled violently, and his whole body froze on the spot. Nie Tian, your level of swordsmanship. The fat cat also realized something at this time. It opened its mouth wide, but it was too shocked to say the following words. My level of swordsmanship has reached the level of sword essence. After being frozen on the spot for more than 10 seconds, Nie Tian finally reacted. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. The three evils sword mark merged with his blood and gave birth to the three evils sword vein in Nie Tian, and his level of swordsmanship directly increased by 1 level, reaching the level of sword essence. This was too terrifying. Even Nie Tian himself found it hard to accept. It was more difficult to increase one's level of swordsmanship than to increase one's strength. Every level of swordsmanship was almost equivalent to a level. For a swordsman, this was a qualitative leap. Nie Tian had just reached the level of sword bone a few days ago. Now, he had directly reached the level of sword essence. This speed of advancement was outrageous. Many swordsman geniuses had to spend hundreds or even thousands of years to reach the next level, but Nie Tian only used a few days. This comparison was hopeless. The three evil sword vein was simply too terrifying for Nie Tian. If Nie Tian had only absorbed the power of the three evil sword mark, at most his strength would have increased. However, he had nurtured the three evils sword vein. Although this did not increase his strength, it was a qualitative leap for his body of martial arts. This was not only an improvement of his body of martial arts, but also an improvement of his talent in swordsmanship. Nie Tian's talent in swordsmanship was very strong, and his comprehension of swordsmanship was top-notch. He was definitely a top genius in the plain world. However, compared to the swordsmanship geniuses in the realm, his talent in swordsmanship was a little weak, even weaker than Moihan. But now, Nie Tian had the three evils sword vein in his body. This was definitely a stronger talent in swordsmanship than any of the three evils sword mark bloodlines. At this moment, Nie Tian was definitely a top genius in swordsmanship even in the 9 realms. After a long time, Nie Tian finally calmed down. He looked at Rui Qianyu and suddenly saw blood at the corner of her eyes. He could not help but ask nervously, Rui Qianyu, are you okay? Nie Tian was able to nurture the three evil sword vein because of Rui Qianyu's green eyes. The power of the myriad would had caused his blood to boil and fuse with the three evils sword mark's power. Nie Tian was worried that Rui Qianyu had used the 9 colored eyes too much, and the blood-devouring power in her body had flared up. The blood-devouring power was a negative effect of the 9 colored eyes. The more 9 colored eyes were opened, the more terrifying the blood-devouring power would become. I'm fine. Rui Qianyu squeezed out a smile and said faintly. But just as she finished speaking, her body sank and she could no longer stand. Nie Tian quickly rushed forward and hugged Rui Qianyu. Using his divine sense, he could not help but tremble. He anxiously asked, Rui Qianyu, which eye have you opened? Nie Tian could feel that the blood-devouring power in Rui Qianyu's body was very violent, and was crazily devouring her blood. Chapter 1689. Nie Tian's expression flickered with astonishment. The 5th pupil. Nie Tian was taken aback. He didn't think that Rui Qianyu had already awakened the 5th pupil of the 9 colored pupils. The 9 colored pupils was ranked 8th out of the 10 unique pupils, but other than Rui Qianyu, Nie Tian had never seen anyone who had awakened more than 3 pupils. But now Rui Qianyu had awakened the 5th pupil. How could he not be shocked? At the same time, Nie Tian also felt extremely worried. Because the more pupils Rui Qianyu awakened, the more terrifying the blood-devouring force would be. Nie Tian, I'm fine. Rui Qianyu could tell that Nie Tian was worried. She squeezed out a smile and said faintly. Nie Tian nodded. At this moment, although Rui Qianyu was under the pressure of the blood-devouring force, Her life was temporarily not in danger. "Nye Tian, let's leave this place first," Rui Qinyu frowned and said anxiously. "Okay." Nye Tian nodded and a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. Wild energy enveloped Rui Qinyu, and the two of them immediately left the place. Nye Tian brought Tawny with him, and sprinted along the tunnel. A moment later, he arrived at the entrance of the tunnel. Without hesitation, Nye Tian brought Rui Qinyu and Tawny and dashed forward like a sharp sword. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian dashed out of the stone pillar and arrived at the Great Hall. "I'm finally out." Nye Tian couldn't help but let out a long breath of impure air, his expression looking much more relaxed. Nye Tian steadied himself and looked outside the Great Hall. Feng Buyu and the Ghost King's secret guards were still fighting. "Let's leave." Nye Tian cast a glance at Rui Qinyu, as a faint smile appeared on his face. He retracted his aura as the astral wings enveloped Rui Qinyu and Tawny, after which, his silhouette flickered as he dashed out of the Great Hall. Nye Tian's figure was agile. Even though he was carrying two people, he still easily passed through the killing array in the main hall and arrived outside the array. "It's that kid." Nye Tian's sudden appearance immediately attracted the attention of the Ghost King's shadow guards. Many of the shadow guards cried out in shock and flew into the air, staring at Nye Tian with killing intent in their eyes. "Huh!" At this time, Ji Qiushang also noticed Nye Tian, and his eyes trembled, his face filled with astonishment. He had never imagined that Nye Tian would actually be able to come out safely after entering the Ghost King Hall. "This is..." In the next moment, Ji Qiushang discovered that there were two more people beside Nye Tian. His expression couldn't help but stiffen, and his eyes trembled violently. He immediately recognized that one of the women beside Nye Tian was the 72nd wife that the Ghost King Palace Lord was going to marry. At this time, he finally understood that the reason Nye Tian and Feng Buyu barged into the Ghost King Palace was to save someone. "Stop him." Ji Qiushang knew this, and his expression changed as he roared in a low voice. If he allowed Nye Tian and the others to leave today, the Ghost King Palace Lord would definitely not let him off easily. If the Ghost King Palace Lord's new wife was snatched away from the Ghost King Palace, then he, as the Shadow Guard commander, would be too useless. "Yes." The group of Ghost King's secret guards replied in unison, and their silhouettes flashed, madly rushing towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian, facing tens of Ghost King's secret guards, not only was there fear in his eyes, but there was also killing intent. "Nye Tian." Rui Qinyu sensed how terrifying the Ghost King's secret guards were. Her beautiful eyes flickered, unable to hide the fear in her eyes. "Don't be afraid, I'll definitely get you out of here." Nye Tian smiled faintly and took a step forward. His figure soared into the sky like a sharp sword. Sword aura bloomed from his body, and his whole body was covered with black magical symbols. Nye Tian's current strength was still at the peak of mid-god. Even if his way of the sword had increased, he still had to use the three great forbidden techniques against overgods. With the three forbidden techniques activated, Nye Tian's aura skyrocketed, and his strength skyrocketed to early overgod. However, a smear of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He had just activated the three forbidden techniques not long ago, and now that he activated them again, his martial body was under great pressure. "Kill!" The Ghost King's secret guards roared in unison, and their aura merged together like a vast ocean, pressing down on Nye Tian. Nye Tian was not afraid at all against the combined forces of several dozen Ghost King's secret guards. Instead, he moved and slashed out with his sword. Boom! In the air, a sword flashed with a sharp light, slashing towards one of the Ghost King's secret guards. With a single strike, Nye Tian forcefully broke through the combined pressure of several dozen Ghost King's secret guards. When the sword landed, one of the Ghost King's secret guards died on the spot. The others were stunned by the scene before them. They could not help but tremble as chills ran down their spines. They did not expect Nie Tian's strength to be so terrifying. How is this possible? Ji Qiushang was also stunned, and he cried out in surprise. He discovered that Nie Tian seemed to be much stronger than before after coming out of the Ghost King Hall. Feng Buyu was also stunned. He did not expect Nie Tian to be so ferocious. Those who stand in my way will die. Nie Tian stood in the air and sneered. He glanced past the Ghost King's secret guards with his murderous gaze, and they could not help but retreat. The increase in his way of the sword made Nie Tian's sword intent several times more powerful. Although he was only an early overgod right now, a single strike was enough to kill mid or even late overgods instantly. If he fought with everything he had, he could even fend off peak overgods. Unfortunately, his strength had only been temporarily increased by the 3 forbidden techniques, so he could not maintain it for too long. After scaring away the Ghost King's secret guards, Nie Tian's figure flickered, bringing Raindrop, Thousand Leaves, and Little Li with him as he directly arrived beside Feng Bu. Nie Tian, are these the people you want to save? Feng Bu looked at Nie Tian in great surprise. He had never thought that Nie Tian would actually save them. Yeah. Nie Tian nodded slightly and said, Brother Feng, please take them away first. I'll stop these people. Feng Bu frowned. He was stunned. He doubted his ears. The enemies before them were several dozen overgod Ghost King secret guards, as well as a peak overgod, Ji Qiushang. Could Nie Tian stop them all by himself? Brother Feng, trust me. Take them to the leader of the Sunluo Hall. I'll come find you very soon. Nie Tian nodded slightly. His eyes were filled with great confidence. Feng Buyu's current battle prowess might not be as great as Nie Tian's, but he was faster than Nie Tian. Getting him to leave with Rui Qianyu and Tawny was the best choice. All right. Be careful. Feng Bu could feel the confidence in Nie Tian's eyes. He nodded and prepared to leave with Rui Qianyu and Tawny. Nie Tian. Rui Qianyu frowned. Her eyes were filled with reluctance. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Don't worry. I'll definitely go find you. Feng Bu no longer hesitated and turned to leave. If you want to leave, you'll have to get through me first. But at this moment, Ji Qiushang took a step forward. His aura surged violently, like a huge city wall, stretching across the sky. Do you think you can block my sword? Nie Tian looked at Ji Qiushang and sneered. He raised his sword and released a terrifying sword intent aura from his body. Vortexes of sword intent surged around his body, churning madly as if they wanted to devour everything in their path. Chapter 1690. Nie Tian's figure stood in the air, the sword aura around him surging. It was extremely terrifying, several times stronger than the sword intent he released before. At this moment, Nie Tian was like a sharp sword that could kill the heavens, killing everything in its path. With the opening of the tri-evil sword vein, Nie Tian's combat strength increased once again, allowing him to fight Ji Qiushang head-on. Ji Qiushang was a peak lord god and a swordsman. He was a good opponent. He could use him to test out just how strong the tri-evil sword vein was. This aura. Ji Qiushang felt the sword intent around Nie Tian's body. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and his expression became sluggish. He felt that the sword intent released by Nie Tian was somewhat similar to the evil woman's sword seal, but there was also a difference. It seemed to be even more terrifying than the evil woman's sword seal. How is this possible? Ji Qiushang was shocked. He didn't think that there would be a sword seal more terrifying than the evil woman's sword seal in this world. He didn't think that Nie Tian's tri-evil sword vein was the bloodline power formed by the fusion of the tri-evil sword seal. Of course, it was stronger than the evil woman's sword shadow. Nie Tian's eyes locked onto Ji Qiushang. His eyes trembled slightly, and the sword intent around his body became even stronger. Kill. In the next moment, he roared and stabbed out with his sword. Endless sword intent instantly condensed, and a 5,000-meter-long sword shadow appeared, blasting towards Ji Qiushang. At first glance, this sword shadow didn't seem any different from the sword shadow Nie Tian used before. But if one looked closely, they would find that outside the sword shadow, there was a whirlpool of sword intent. It was like a rune, wrapping around the sword shadow and increasing the power of the sword intent by several times. Ji Qiushang suddenly felt the approaching murderous intent. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. Only then did he react. He quickly stabbed out with his sword, and a huge sword shadow appeared. It slashed down from the sky, causing the void to tremble slightly. Boom! In the void, the two sword shadows were like two wild beasts, colliding with each other. A loud bang resounded through the space. Billowing waves of air shot out, and a terrifying oppressive aura spread through the space. Chi chi chi. The sword shadows collided with each other, and the sword wills collided with each other. In the void, the endless sword light shone brightly, filling the entire space. The group of Ghost King shadow guards were stunned by the scene in front of them, their expressions sluggish, and they were speechless. Boom! At this time, one of the sword images occupied an overwhelming advantage. Sword light flourished, and a huge sword image came crashing down, like a collapsing mountain, smashing towards Ji Qiushang. Suddenly sensing that something was amiss, Ji Qiushang's eyes trembled, and then he let out a startled cry. The sword intent around him condensed into a sword shield, but when the sword shadow descended, the sword shield directly shattered. Ji Qiushang's figure was like a kite with a broken string, flying backwards, leaving behind a trail of blood in the air. "Commander!" When the Ghost King's secret guards saw this, they exclaimed in unison, their eyes filled with extreme disbelief. The almost invincible Lord Commander in their eyes was actually sent flying by a sword. This scene was too shocking. Ji Qiushang's figure whistled through the air, but then he suddenly paused and stabilized himself in midair. He stabilized himself, his body dripping with blood, and the green ghost mask on his face trembled. How could he have imagined that the power of a single sword strike from Nie Tian would be so terrifying? Not dead. Nie Tian looked at Ji Qiushang, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, as if he was somewhat disappointed. He had activated the 3 forbidden techniques and the triangle sword range, but he had not killed Ji Qiushang with his full strength, which made him rather dissatisfied. This was the first time he had opened the triangle sword range, and he was not familiar with its power, so it was normal that he could not kill Ji Qiushang. After all, Ji Qiushang was a peak-over god. If he died like this, it would be rather laughable. The first time the triangle sword range was opened, it had almost allowed Nie Tian to kill a peak-over god. The strength of the triangle sword range was unimaginable. At this time, Feng Buyu had already taken the opportunity to leave. Nie Tian's face relaxed a lot. "Brat, what kind of power is this?" Ji Qiushang's eyes trembled, and then he shook off the blood on his body and said with a deep voice. If he had not experienced it personally, Ji Qiushang would not have believed that such a terrifying sword seal existed in the world. "You don't have the right to know what kind of power this is," Nie Tianling sneered, and his eyes were filled with disdain. "How arrogant!" Ji Qiushang roared furiously. His body trembled, and he wanted to attack, but he vomited a mouthful of blood and almost lost his footing in the air. Although the attack just now had not taken his life, it had heavily injured him. "Kill!" At this moment, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and he spat out a single word. It was cold and murderous, and then he moved, directly slashing at the sword behind him. Boom! The berserk sword pierced out without any warning. The sword beam shot out 10,000 meters away. The dazzling light trembled. Several Ghost King shadow guards were directly swallowed by the sword shadow. They didn't even have time to scream. Nie Tian's sword fell, and he suddenly turned around, looking at the other Ghost King's secret guards, his eyes incomparably cold. The dozens of Ghost King's secret guards were stared at by Nie Tian, and suddenly felt a bone-chilling cold spread in their hearts, as if they had fallen into an ice cellar, and the cold penetrated their bones. At this time, Nye Tian was too terrifying, and his strength was so terrifying that it made people's hair stand on end. Like a god of death, he stood in the air. Tell the Ghost King Palace Master that the person who took away Rui Qianyu is Nye Tian. If he wants to kill me, he can come to Sin Luo City to find me. Nye Tian did not attack again, but spoke in a deep voice, and every word and sentence was filled with extreme arrogance and arrogance. He killed the Ghost King's secret guards to send a message to the Ghost King Palace Master. I, Nye Tian, am not to be trifled with. What the Ghost King Palace Master did to Rui Qianyu and the others will not end here. It will not be long before Nye Tian will visit the Ghost King Palace again, and at that time, it will be the death of the Ghost King Palace Master. As the cold and murderous voice fell, the Ghost King's secret guards were all silent, not even daring to breathe. Nye Tianling laughed, no longer hesitating. His figure moved, stepped into the air, and swept away. Ji Qiushang and the others stared at Nye Tian's figure in a daze, their eyes trembling violently, and did not dare to chase after him. Nye Tian. Until Nye Tian's figure disappeared completely, Ji Qiushang's trembling eyes recovered, and was replaced by rage. Nye Tian saved Rui Qianyu and the others under his nose. How could he not be angry? But what he did not know was that Nye Tian took away not only Rui Qianyu and Tawny, but also the ancient inheritance of the Three Evils Sword Seal. When the Ghost King Palace Master learned that Nye Tian integrated the Three Evil Sword Seal, what kind of expression would he have? It would certainly not be good. High in the sky, Nye Tian's figure rushed wildly, and soon left the Ghost King Palace. After confirming that Ji Qiushang and the others did not chase after him, Nye Tian's momentum dissipated, but his face was extremely pale. Using 3 forbidden techniques in succession, coupled with the activation of the Three Evil Sword Seal, made his body very weak, and he urgently needed to recover. Nye Tian did not go directly back to the Mo family's small courtyard, but to the dark forest. He was worried that Ouyang Fu and Mo Yanwei were in trouble, and wanted to rush over to see. The Ghost King Palace Master did not return to the Ghost King Palace, which meant that he was stalled by Ouyang Fu and Mo Yanwei. Nye Tian's speed was very fast, and a moment later, his figure appeared in the dark forest. But strangely, he did not see Ouyang Fu and the others. Chapter 1691. In the Mo family's courtyard, Nye Tian's figure appeared in midair. Not good, something happened. Even before he entered the courtyard, he smelled the stench of blood. His brows creased into a frown, and his figure flickered, landing in the middle of the courtyard. The moment Nye Tian landed on the ground, he dashed towards the main hall. Second brother! At this time, a sorrowful cry came from the main hall. It was Mo Yuanyi's voice. Nye Tian's face darkened as he appeared in the main hall. Nye Tian. Seeing Nye Tian's sudden appearance, everyone was stunned for a moment before exclaiming in unison. Nye Tian's face was gloomy as he looked at Mo Yanwei lying on the ground in the main hall. His body was drenched in blood, and his vitality was fading rapidly. Mr. Moer, what's wrong? Nye Tian took a step forward, sensing Mo Yanwei's aura. He was injured by the Ghost King Palace Master's sword, and the sword intent has spread to his meridians. I'm afraid he won't be able to live. Ouyang Fu's face was pale, and he said in a low voice. Nye Tian glanced at Ouyang Fu. The latter's expression was solemn, and his face was deathly pale. His aura was weak, and it seemed like his injuries weren't light. The Ghost King Palace Master was very strong. Even if Ouyang Fu and Mo Yanwei joined hands, they were still defeated. Nye Tian saw that although Ouyang Fu's injuries were serious, his life wasn't in danger. He ignored him and walked to Mo Yanwei's side. Releasing his divine sense, Nye Tian sensed Mo Yanwei's condition, and a frown appeared on his face. Mr. Nye, my second brother, he. Mo Yuanyi's eyes quivered when he saw Nye Tian's expression, and his voice trembled. Sword intent invaded his body, shattering all his meridians. His true meridians and godheads are also heavily injured. Nye Tion's expression was gloomy as he explained. This. Mo Yuani was dumbfounded, and tears welled up in his eyes. Rest assured, Mr. Mo, I can save him. Nye Tion laughed at this moment and then squatted down. The sword essence around him slowly gushed out and enveloped Mo Yanwei. The sword essence seeped into the latter's body. Nye Tion's sword intent was gentle. Like the spring breeze and rain, it nourished Mo Yanwei's broken meridians and forced the remaining sword intent out of his body. What? Ouyang Fu and Mo Yuani couldn't help but stare at Nye Tion in disbelief. By now, both of them already knew that the Ghost King Palace Master was from the Sangxi family, Ji family. The wound on Mo Yanwei's body was left by the Ghost King Palace Lord's evil sword seal. How could Nye Tion's sword intent be so terrifying that it could actually force out the power of the evil sword seal? After a while, under the nourishment of Nye Tion's sword will, Mo Yanwei's meridians were slightly healed, and the wounds all over his body were getting better. His breath was stabilized, and his life was no longer in danger. He's fine. Nye Tion stood up, but his face was a bit pale, and his forehead was covered with beads of sweat. His body was in urgent need of recovery, and now he had to use the Sangxi sword vein. It was too much for him to bear. Mr. Nye Tion, your sword intent. Mo Yuani looked at Nye Tion with a surprised expression. He clearly felt that Nye Tion's sword intent had the aura of the flowing evil sword seal. Mo Yuani had the flowing evil sword seal in his body, but it was not activated yet, so he was very familiar with the aura of the flowing evil sword seal. Ouyang Fu also had the same expression at this time. He looked at Nye Tion with a sluggish face. He felt the aura of the 9 evil sword seal in Nye Tion's sword intent. Mr. Ouyang, the power of the evil sword seal remains in your body. I'll help you force it out first, and then I'll explain everything to you. Nye Tion faintly smiled, then took a step forward and used the same method to force out the power of the evil sword seal in Ouyang Fu's body. The power in his body was the Sangxi sword vein, which was stronger than any of the Sangxi sword seals. Of course, he could force out the power of the evil sword seal. Phew! After doing all this, Nye Tion let out a long breath, and his expression became much more relaxed. Ouyang Fu's injuries were serious, but after Nye Tion's treatment, he was more than half healed. Then, Nye Tion told them about how he entered the Ghost King Palace's secret underground chamber, not hiding anything. You fused the Sangxi sword seal. Ouyang Fu and Mo Yuani exclaimed at the same time. The shock in their hearts was written on their faces. The two of them had never expected that Nye Tion would actually merge the 3 evil sword seals by chance. No wonder he could force out the power of the evil sword seal. Yes. Nye Tion nodded and said with a faint smile, the Ghost King Palace has a lot of secrets, and it's very strange inside. I wanted to save people, so I didn't have time to examine it carefully. Therefore, I don't know why the 3 evil sword seals that have been passed down from ancient times would be there. Mo Yuani and Ouyang Fu frowned, and their expressions changed again as if they were thinking about something. You two are from the 3 Evils clan. What do you think about the underground chamber in the Ghost King Palace? Nye Tion couldn't help but frown when he saw their reaction. Mo Yuani and Ouyang Fu looked at each other with hesitation. It was obvious that they had discovered something, but they didn't want to say it. Seeing this, Nye Tion didn't force them and only faintly smiled. Mr. Nye, it's actually nothing. At this time, Mo Yuani bitterly smiled and said, I feel that the secret underground chamber you entered is most likely the Sangxi ancestral grounds. The Sangxi ancestral grounds? Nye Tion was slightly startled and looked at Mo Yuani, waiting for the latter to continue. Mo Yuani glanced at Ouyang Fu, and the latter nodded. Then he said, the Sangxi ancestral grounds is the Sangxi clan's ancestral grounds. According to the Emo clan's ancient records, the Emo clan's ancestor obtained the flowing evil sword seal inheritance from the Sangxi ancestral grounds, and only then did the Emo clan reach its peak. The Ouyang clan also has the same records. The Ouyang clan's ancestor also obtained the 9 evil sword seal inheritance from the Sangxi ancestral grounds. Ouyang Fu's eyes slightly sank as he lightly said. Nie Tian's eyes flickered, and he immediately understood. It seemed that the Ji clan's ancestor also obtained the evil sword seal inheritance from the Sangxi ancestral grounds. Mo Yuani sighed and said, the 3 ancestors of the Emo clan, Ouyang clan, and Ji clan each obtained a sword seal inheritance, but each of them wanted to obtain the other 2 sword seals, so the 3 of them started a never-ending battle. After the death of the 3 ancestors, the 3 evils family became eternal enemies. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth slightly twitched. So the enmity between the Sangxi clan began because of the Sangxi ancestral grounds. In fact, the ancestors of the 3 clans each obtained 1 inheritance, and this was already the best ending. However, people were not satisfied and always wanted to obtain more power, which led to the tragedy of the Sangxi clan. The Sangxi ancestral grounds, I always thought it was just a legend. I didn't expect it to actually exist. Ouyang Fu looked at Nie Tian and laughed. Mr. Nie obtaining the Sangxi sword seal inheritance can be considered a good ending. Mo Yuani nodded, agreeing with Ouyang Fu. If Nie Tian did not appear, and the Ghost King Palace Master merged with the Sangxi sword seal inheritance, it would definitely be a disaster for the Mo and Ouyang clan. Chapter 1692. In the hall, Ouyang Fu and the others calmed down a lot and focused their attention on Nie Tian. Nie Tian looked at Ouyang Fu and Mo Yuani and said with a faint smile, Mr. Mo, Mr. Ouyang, it's now clear that the enmity between the 2 of you was orchestrated by the sect master of the Ghost King Palace. Now that the truth has been revealed, I think the Mo clan and the Ouyang clan don't need to be enemies anymore. Yes. Ouyang Fu nodded and then looked at Mo Yuani. Patriarch Mo, I represent the Ouyang family today to make peace with the Mo family. The Mo family and the Ouyang family are no longer enemies but allies. What does Patriarch Mo think? Mo Yuani was stunned at first, then his eyes flickered and he said excitedly, the Mo family is willing to ally with the Ouyang family. Good. Ouyang Fu and Mo Yuani stepped forward at the same time and high-fived. When Nie Tian saw this, the corners of his mouth curled up into a gratified smile. It was a wonderful thing to make 2 families that had been enemies for hundreds of thousands of years shake hands. At this time, Ouyang Fu suddenly took out a divine pill. Immediately, a surging aura filled the entire hall. A rank 9 divine pill. The moment the divine pill appeared, Nie Tian frowned and exclaimed in his heart. Although his current alchemy skills were not good enough, he was still an alchemist with amazing perception. He could sense the rank of the pill in Ouyang Fu's hand. Rank 9 divine pills were priceless items even in the upper realms. They were extremely precious. Ouyang Fu handed over the pill and said, Brother Mo, I seriously injured you back then. This is a rank 9 divine pill, the 7-fold profound spirit pill. After taking it, your injuries should recover in half a month. Thank you, Brother Ouyang. Mo Yuani's eyes trembled. He accepted the pill and thanked him. Putting away the pill, Mo Yuani looked at Mo Yanwei, who was still lying on the ground, and asked, Mr. Nie, is my second brother okay? He's not in danger. Nie Tian nodded slightly and said, but his 9 yuan meridians and all the meridians in his body are seriously injured. It will take at least a few months for him to recover. Thank you, Mr. Nie. Mo Yuani bowed deeply and sincerely expressed his gratitude. If it weren't for Nie Tian, Mo Yanwei might not have been able to escape this time. Nie Tian smiled faintly, then looked at Ouyang Fu and asked, Mr. Ouyang, how is the Ghost King Palace, Lord? He injured me and Brother Mo, and he also suffered some injuries. I'm afraid he's already back at the Ghost King Palace, Ouyang Fu said solemnly, his eyes filled with terrifying killing intent. The Ghost King Palace Master killed his wife and son, making him his mortal enemy. How could he not be angry? Mr. Ouyang, please stay here for a day. Once I recover my strength, I will help you and Mr. Mo to open the sword seal in your body, Nie Tian said after thinking for a moment. He already had the triangle sword vein in his body, and could help Ouyang Fu and the others open the sword seals in their bodies. When Ouyang Fu heard that Nie Tian wanted to help him open the sword seal, his eyes couldn't help but tremble with joy. Nie Tian didn't stay any longer. After leaving the hall, he first went to check on Rui Jince's condition, then returned to his room to cultivate. Rui Qianyu and Tawny were taken to Sin Luo City by Feng Biu, but Nie Tian wasn't in a hurry to find them. Half a day later, Nie Tian walked out of his room. He had recovered to his peak state, and his whole body was as sharp as an unsheathed sword. When he came to the courtyard, Ouyang Fu and the others were already waiting for him. Mr. Ouyang, are you ready? Nie Tian walked over and looked at Ouyang Fu, who seemed to be a little nervous, and smiled faintly. Yes, please make your move, Mr. Nie. Ouyang Fu nodded, unable to hide his excitement. He was already a martial artist who was tens of thousands of years old, and had long passed the golden age for martial artists to improve their strength. He thought that he would never have the chance to open the sword seal in his life, but he didn't expect that he would be able to open it now. Although it was already very late for Ouyang Fu to open the sword seal, it was still better than not opening it. It was still very helpful for improving his strength and swordsmanship. Most importantly, after Ouyang Fu opened the sword seal, he might be able to open the sword seal for other members of the Ouyang family in the future. Nie Tian nodded slightly, took a step forward, and the sword intent permeated from his body, directly enveloping Ouyang Fu. Hum! The sword intent surged around Ouyang Fu's body, emitting a strange sword hum. Ouyang Fu felt a reaction in his blood, as though it was boiling violently, and the hidden power in his blood was about to explode. Nie Tian controlled the sword intent and carefully sensed the changes in Ouyang Fu's body. The sword intent seeped into the latter's body, transforming into a stimulating force. After a while, Ouyang Fu felt the blood in his body surging crazily, as though it was about to rush out of his body. There was a faint layer of blood mist surrounding his body, and it looked extremely frightening. The sooner the sword seal was opened, the better, and the earlier, the easier it was. Ouyang Fu was old, and his strength was very strong. His sword intent greatly suppressed the power of his bloodline, so it was more difficult for him to open the sword seal. Mo Yue and the others watched from the side, their eyes shining brightly, as though they were even more nervous than Nie Tian and Ouyang Fu. After a while, the blood mist around Ouyang Fu became thicker, and the air was filled with the smell of blood. His face was hideous, and it was obvious that he was in great pain. However, he did not make any sound and instead endured it. 9 Evil Sword Seal, open! At this moment, the corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly, and he suddenly roared. Following which, a terrifying sword aura surged around Ouyang Fu, soaring into the sky with a majestic aura. After a long time, the sword aura disappeared into the sky. Ouyang Fu's tensed body relaxed, and he almost couldn't stand. Opening the sword seal at his age was too much of a burden on his martial body. If not for his strong martial body, his life might have been in danger. Mr. Ouyang, are you okay? Nie Tian stepped forward and wiped the beads of sweat from his forehead. His face was a little pale. I'm fine. Thank you for opening the sword seal for me, Mr. Nie. Ouyang Fu nodded, unable to hide the great joy on his face. He could feel that the 9 evil sword seal in his body had already been opened. With a faint smile, Nie Tian let out a long breath. He originally wanted to open the sword seal for Mo Yue and Mo Yanwei, but it seemed that it was better not to. Mo Yue and Mo Yanwei's strength was below Ouyang Fu's. If they forcefully opened the sword seal, their lives might be in danger. However, there was still one person whose sword seal must be opened, and that was Mo Lingshan. Shan, are you ready? Nye Tian let out a long breath, looked at Mo Lingshan, and said with a faint smile, "Yes." Mo Lingshan nodded heavily, but her young face was very determined. Nye Tian nodded with a smile, and once again released all the sword intent in his body, enveloping Mo Lingshan. Mo Lingshan was only 6 years old, the best age to open the sword seal. The process of opening the sword seal was very easy and smooth. Boom! After a while, Mo Lingshan's small body shook, and a sword aura rushed into the sky. Chapter 1693. The sword aura released by Mo Lingshan quickly dissipated in the air. However, everyone was surprised and looked at Mo Lingshan in disbelief. The sword aura just now was far inferior to the sword aura released by Ouyang Fu. However, Mo Lingshan was a beginner swordsman and was still stuck in the most basic realm of sword technique. Under such circumstances, the sword seal could actually release such a powerful sword aura, which showed the strength of the sword seal in her body. This little girl, the flowing evil sword seal in her body, is even more terrifying than her sisters. When she grows up in the future, it is very likely that she will become a peak swordsman, Fat Cat said in a deep voice. Nye Tian frowned. Fat Cat rarely gave such a high evaluation of people, which meant that Mo Lingshan's talent was indeed very high. After helping Mo Lingshan open the sword seal, Nye Tian let out a long sigh of relief and was ready to leave. Mo Yuani looked at Nye Tian and said, "Mr. Nye, you snatched someone from the Ghost King Palace, so the Ghost King Palace Lord will definitely not let you go. Why not leave Sunluo Ghost Region first and settle accounts with the Ghost King Palace Lord after you improve your strength?" Mo Yuani firmly believed that as long as Nye Tian was given some time, the latter would definitely grow quickly, so there was really no need to continue to stay in Sunluo Ghost Region. Brother Mo is right. Ouyang Fu stepped forward and said, "Mr. Nye, with your talent, sooner or later you will definitely be able to trample on the Ghost King Palace Lord, so there is no need to rush revenge. If Mr. Nye doesn't mind, you can follow me back to Yangguan City first." Nye Tian looked at Mo Yuani and Ouyang Fu, smiled and said, "I appreciate your kindness, but I still have some things to deal with in Sunluo Ghost Region, so I can't leave now." Mo Yuani and Ouyang Fu looked at each other, not knowing what Nye Tian wanted to do, but since he didn't want to say, they didn't ask. Then, Mo Yuani and Ouyang Fu each gave Nye Tian a token, which was the family head token of the Mo family and the Ouyang family. With the family head token, Nye Tian could go to Qianma City and Yangguan City, where the two families were located, to find them. "Mr. Nye, if there's anything you need our help with, please don't hesitate to ask," Ouyang Fu said sincerely. "Many thanks." Nye Tian smiled and put the 2 command medallions away. Mo Yuani and Ouyang Fu were going to take their people back first. Even if they continued to stay here, they would not be able to pose a threat to the Ghost King Palace Lord. Although Ouyang Fu hated the Ghost King Palace Lord, he was too weak to avenge his wife and son. It just so happened that Nye Tian had helped him activate the 9 evil sword seal. He wanted to cultivate for a period of time and strive for a breakthrough in his strength before thinking about revenge. "Mr. Ouyang." Ouyang Fu was just about to leave when Nye Tian stopped him. "Sir, is there anything else?" Ouyang Fu looked at Nye Tian and frowned. Nye Tian thought for a while and finally said, "Ouyang Lingxie can't be trusted." When Ouyang Fu heard Nye Tian mention Ouyang Lingxie, his face darkened. He did not know why Nye Tian would suddenly mention Ouyang Lingxie. If anyone else had said this about Ouyang Lingxie, Ouyang Fu would definitely have turned hostile on the spot. However, Nye Tian was different. Nye Tian's words made him think carefully. "Brother Ouyang, Ouyang Lingxie is indeed suspicious. You must be wary of him." Mo Yuani stepped forward and said. Ouyang Fu's face darkened and said, "I understand." Nye Tian saw Ouyang Fu's reaction and smiled bitterly. It seemed that the latter did not believe him at all. Ouyang Fu doted on Ouyang Lingxie too much and trusted him too much. Not turning hostile on the spot was already giving Nie Tian a lot of face. Sir, Ouyang Fu will take his leave. Ouyang Fu did not stay any longer. He bade farewell to Nie Tian and left. Sir, Ouyang Fu and Ouyang Lingxie are father and son. It is normal that he does not want to suspect Ouyang Lingxie. Mo Yuani looked at Ouyang Fu's back and sighed. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He did not mind that Ouyang Fu did not believe him. He was just worried that Ouyang Fu would be in danger. However, he could not care too much now because he had many things to deal with. Then, Nie Tian left with Ruoyu and Zhensu. Mo Yuani wanted to send a few Mo family's secret guards to protect Nie Tian, but the latter refused. With Nie Tian's current strength, as long as it was not a supreme god, he was not afraid. After leaving the Mo family's courtyard, Nie Tian looked at the Ghost King city. His eyes flashed and he murmured, "The seven-leaf dragon's tongue orchid is not in my hands yet." Nie Tian had made a deal with Gui Shanquan and fulfilled the latter's conditions. However, things had developed far beyond Nie Tian's expectations. He had completely fallen out with the Ghost King Palace Master, so the latter would not give him the opposing blood pills recipe. Without the opposing blood pills recipe, it was impossible to get the seven-leaf dragon's tongue orchid from Gui Shanquan unless Nie Tian went to rob it. In fact, with Nie Tian's current strength, no one would be able to stop him if he went to the Ghost King herb orchid. However, he did not want to do so. It was too big of a target. Moreover, Ruoyu and Zhensu were by his side. Nie Tian, you don't need the seven-leaf dragon's tongue orchid. We can think of another way. Fat Cat's figure suddenly appeared and said with a smile. All right. Nie Tian smiled bitterly. This was the only way. Nie Tian no longer hesitated. He took Ruoyu and Zhensu and ran in the direction of Sun Luo City. Half an hour later, his figure appeared outside of Sun Luo City. I wonder how Rui Qianyu and the others are doing? Nie Tian looked at the majestic Sun Luo City, the corner of his mouth slightly raised as he murmured. He still had a deal with Sun Luo 7 Night. He believed that the latter would take good care of Rui Qianyu and the others. Nie Tian brought Ruoyu and Zhensu into the city. He wanted to go directly to Sun Luo Temple. On one hand, he had to confirm the safety of Rui Qianyu and Tawny. On the other hand, he had to help Ruoyu recover her divine sense as soon as possible. Nie Tian walked on the wide street. There were not many people around. Sun Luo City was obviously much more deserted than Ghost King City. As he walked, Nie Tian paid attention to everything around him. He was a little worried that people from Ghost King Palace would suddenly appear. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly sensed several figures dashing in his direction. He couldn't help but furrow his brows and become slightly nervous. Nie Tian concealed his aura. When the figures came closer, his expression changed. He was shocked. One of the figures' aura was very familiar to Nie Tian. It was the elder of the inescapable net, Dugu Lingtian. Dugu Lingtian? Why is he here? Nie Tian frowned. He was puzzled. At the same time, he activated the holographic divine glyphs and carefully extended his divine sense towards Dugu Lingtian and the others. A few vague faces appeared in Nie Tian's mind as he spread his divine sense. One of them was extremely well hidden. His expression stiffened and he almost exposed himself. This guy is Lai Yen Jiufeng. Nie Tian's eyes flickered, but his face grew calm as he locked his soul sense on the aura. He exclaimed inwardly. Chapter 1694. Lai Yen Jiufeng, why is he here? Nie Tian locked onto the person's aura and was very sure that it was Lai Yen Jiufeng. Nie Tian was not surprised that Lai Yen Jiufeng was with Dugu Lingtian. Lai Yen Jiufeng already knew a lot of things when he met him. It was not strange for him to find the inescapable net with his abilities. What confused Nie Tian was why Lai Yen Jiufeng was here. Lian Jiufeng and Dugu Lingtian moved quickly. They did not notice Nie Tian. Since they hadn't discovered him, Nie Tian naturally wouldn't provoke them. Instead, he let them leave. Lian Jiufeng was a troublesome person. Nie Tian did not have the time to waste on him. Nie Tian did not think too much about it and continued to walk toward Dark Azura Hall. A while later, Nie Tian arrived outside a towering palace. The corner of his lips curled up slightly. He murmured, "I've finally arrived at Dark Azura Hall." The palace in front of Nie Tian was Dark Azura Hall. "Nie Tian, you're here." A familiar voice rang before he stepped into Dark Azura Hall. Nie Tian looked up and saw a figure descending from the giant city walls. It was Fengbiu. Big brother Feng. Nie Tian smiled when he saw Fengbiu. Since Fengbiu had appeared in Dark Azura Hall, it meant that Rui Qianyu and Tawny had come to Dark Azura Hall as well. As long as they were in Dark Azura Hall, even the palace master of the Ghost King Palace would not be a threat. Obviously, Windbiu had been waiting for Nie Tian's arrival. He smiled and said, "You've escaped from the Ghost King Palace." Amen. Nie Tian nodded with a smile and asked, "Are my friends all right?" "Don't worry, they're fine. I'll take you to them right now," Fengbiu said and led the way. Nie Tian and Ruoyu followed closely behind Fengbiu. With Fengbiu leading the way, Nie Tian and the others did not encounter any obstacles along the way. The architecture and layout of the Sun Luo Hall were very similar to the Ghost King Palace. They both exuded an ancient aura and were probably palaces from the ancient times. Soon, Nie Tian and the others arrived at a beautifully decorated courtyard. "Nie Tian, your friend is inside." Fengbiu smiled faintly and spoke to Nie Tian. Then, his silhouette flashed and he left. Nie Tian didn't bother with Fengbiu. After all, this was Dark Azura Hall, and the latter was much more familiar with the place than he was. "Nie Tian, you're back." As soon as Nie Tian entered the courtyard, a nervous and excited voice rang out. Immediately after, a beautiful silhouette appeared. Standing there, she was like a snow lotus on an ice mountain, so beautiful that it caused people to feel suffocated. Rui Qianyu. Nie Tian looked at Rui Qianyu and smiled faintly. Although he had seen Rui Qianyu before, Nie Tian's mood was different now that he saw her again. At least, he didn't have to be so nervous. At this time, Rui Qianyu saw Rui Qianyu next to Nie Tian. Her beautiful eyes flashed, and she stepped forward and asked nervously, "Rui Qianyu, how is Rui Qianyu?" "He's fine for now." Nie Tian nodded and told her about Rui Qianyu's situation. "Then," he said, "if we want him to recover his soul, we need Tawny to help him remove the Mark of Dusk." "How is Tawny?" Nie Tian suddenly thought of Tawny and asked anxiously. "Big brother Feng brought a divine alchemist to see him. Little Li and the child are fine. The child will be born in 2 days." Rui Qianyu nodded slightly and suddenly looked at Nie Tian. She solemnly said, "Thank you, Nie Tian. We're friends. There's no need to thank me." Nie Tian smiled faintly. He didn't notice that when Rui Qianyu said those words, her eyes were surging with a strange radiance. Next, Nie Tian made arrangements for Rui Qianyu and went to check on Tawny. After confirming that the latter was fine, he felt much more relaxed. In the small courtyard, Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu were sitting on a stone platform. They smiled at each other but didn't say anything. "Qianyu, you're now a late-stage mid-god. You must have experienced a lot during this period of time, right?" Nie Tian broke the silence and said lightly. The last time he saw Rui Qianyu, it was in the Shumi world. It was in the snowfield icefield. Rui Qianyu had fused with the desolate inheritance left behind by the desolate demon Monarch. Then, she went to the depths of the snowfield icefield alone. Nie Tian remembered that Rui Qianyu had awakened 3 pupils at that time: the blue pupil, the red pupil, and the black pupil. When he saw Rui Qianyu again, she had already awakened 5 pupils. Moreover, Nie Tian could clearly sense that Rui Qianyu's mentality seemed to have changed. She was no longer as cold as before. Rui Qinyu nodded slightly and told him what she had experienced during this period of time. It turned out that after she parted ways with Nie Tian, she went to the depths of the snowfield icefield. Then, by a stroke of luck, she entered an alternate dimension from the primordial times. Later, she awakened her purple pupils and ascended to the divine realm. After that, the alternate dimension became unstable and she came to the Senra ghost realm through a space-time vortex. She only met Ruoyu, Zhensu, and Tawny after she came to the Senra ghost realm. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He had never seen Rui Qinyu speak so much at one time. It seemed that her recent experiences had changed her a lot. The current Rui Qinyu had awakened 5 pupils. The red pupil, the blue pupil, the black pupil, the purple pupil, and the green pupil. Nie Tian was very curious about Rui Qinyu's current combat strength. He estimated that if Rui Qinyu awakened all 5 pupils, even he might not be a match for her without using the 3 forbidden skills. However, Nie Tian knew that although Rui Qinyu had awakened all 5 pupils, her martial body was too weak. Coupled with the power of Blood Devour, she could not awaken all 5 pupils at the same time. What about you, Nie Tian? What have you been through during this period of time? Rui Qinyu smiled faintly and took the initiative to ask. Nie Tian sighed softly and did not hide anything. He told her about his own experience, as well as what happened to Emo Rushi and Cher. Rui Qinyu listened very carefully. She did not expect Nie Tian's background to be so complicated. She was also surprised by what happened to Emo Rushi and Cher. This is my current situation. It's not good. Nie Tian smiled bitterly after he finished speaking, but his expression was a little more relaxed. He had been suppressing these things in his heart and had never mentioned them to anyone. Now that someone was willing to listen to him talk about it, he felt a lot more relaxed. Rui Qinyu nodded slightly and said, Nie Tian, I believe in you. You will definitely overcome all the difficulties. Thank you. Nie Tian smiled faintly. The burden on his shoulders was very heavy, but he inexplicably felt a lot more relaxed in his heart. Then, the two talked for a long time before they separated. In Nie Tian's memory, this was the first time he had a long talk with Rui Qinyu. Although the two of them had many interactions in the past, Rui Qinyu was too cold and always kept people at a distance. Therefore, the two of them rarely talked to each other. Nie Tian returned to his room with a faint smile on his face. He was sincerely happy that Rui Qinyu could have such a change. At this time, Fat Cat suddenly appeared and chuckled. Little Nie, your luck with women is really good. Even I am a little jealous. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment and quickly explained, Qianye and I are just friends. Friends can also continue to develop. Fat Cat smiled again and stroked his long beard. You are really not simple. A sage body, a 3 lives meridian, and a rainbow pupils. Why do all the good girls in the world fall for you? Chapter 1695. 3 days later, in the small courtyard, Nie Tian sat at the stone table, and True Serene sat across from him. With a burning gaze, Nie Tian looked at Ruyu and asked tentatively, Ruyu, do you remember who I am? Rain's gaze was a little sluggish, but compared to a few days ago, it was much better. Tawny had helped him remove the scar of dusk, and the residual heart-soul seal curse in his body was slowly disappearing. His divine sense was slowly becoming clearer. Unfortunately, Raindrop's memory was recovering very slowly. She only remembered Tawny and Rui Qinyu, but not Nie Tian. This was actually normal. In Raindrop's eyes, Tawny and Rui Qinyu were definitely more important than Nie Tian. I don't remember. Raindrop shook her head and said lightly. Nie Tian let out a soft sigh, a helpless expression on his face. Although the scar of dusk in his divine sense has been removed, the negative effects of the residual heart-soul seal curse are still there. His divine sense has not completely recovered. Fat Cat appeared on Nie Tian's shoulder and said with a frown, even if his divine sense recovers, How much of his memory will he be able to recover is still unknown. Nye Tian shook his head and smiled bitterly. It seemed that he was too optimistic about Raindrop's situation. Originally, he thought that as long as the Scar of Dusk was formed, Raindrop would be able to recover completely. He's already not bad. He still remembers some people. Fat Cat looked very satisfied and said, based on his current condition, he should be able to recover 70% to 80% of his memory. Only the deepest memories can't be recovered. Fat, when will his divine sense be completely awakened? Nye Tian nodded and asked. Raindrop was still a little muddle-headed now. His divine sense was a little blurred. 1 month at the earliest, 3 months at the slowest. The Fat Cat raised her eyebrows and said, the negative effects of the residual heart-soul sealing curse won't disappear so easily. After saying that, the Fat Cat's figure moved and she returned to the origin fetus space. Nye Tian caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eyes and exclaimed, Fat, you have 3 tails. He suddenly realized that the Fat Cat had grown a 3rd tail. It's only 3. I'm still far from 9, Fat Cat responded snappily. Obviously, she was very dissatisfied with her growth rate. However, Nye Tian felt that this rate of growth was already very fast. After all, it hadn't been long since the Fat Cat left the Glazed Demon Pagoda. The reason why Fat Cat was able to grow so fast was all thanks to Nye Tian's Fiend God nascent embryo. Without the nourishment of the Fiend God's power, it would have been impossible for him to grow so fast. Nye Tian's current strength was at the peak of the mid-god stage. There were signs that he would break through to the high god stage. He had awakened 16 of the 9,000 Fiend Gods' power. The 16 Fiend Gods' power wasn't very strong, but it had an absolute suppressive effect on certain kinds of power. In a critical moment it would often play a crucial role. Nye Tian. At this moment, Rui Qianyu walked out with Tawny standing behind her. She was holding a baby in her arms. It was her and Raindrop's child. Nye Tian stood up and looked at the two of them. He smiled faintly and walked over. When he saw that the baby had fallen asleep, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. He imagined how he would feel when his own child was born. Fan Ruozhen Su saw Hu Shaoli coming out, and his face revealed a happy expression, and he called out in pleasant surprise. His and Tawny's child was named Raindrop. The two hoped that the child would be ordinary. Nye Tian looked at Raindrop. It was hard to associate the person in front of him with the previous Raindrop. Maybe Raindrop's consciousness was still recovering, or maybe she was too excited after becoming a father. Nye Tian. At this moment, Feng Buyu's figure suddenly appeared outside the small courtyard. Brother Feng. Nye Tian saw Feng Buyu and could faintly guess that Sunluo 7 Nights was looking for him. He had been in Sunluo Temple for 3 days. During this time, Sunluo 7 Nights didn't appear, which gave Nye Tian a rare few days of leisure. Little 7 is looking for you. Feng Buyu smiled faintly and didn't enter the small courtyard. I'll be right there. Nye Tian nodded slightly and turned around to leave. At this moment, Feng Buyu opened his mouth again and said, Miss Raindrop, please come with us. Me too? Rui Qianyu frowned slightly and seemed a little surprised. Nye Tian frowned and looked at Feng Buyu. Brother Feng, I alone am enough. Qianya doesn't need to go. Feng Buyu thought for a moment and said, If Miss Raindrop doesn't go, little 7 will probably be angry. Nye Tian frowned and his face couldn't help but become gloomy. Feng Buyu's words were obviously threatening. Nye Tian, I'll go with you. Rui Qianyu saw this and gently grabbed Nye Tian's hand and smiled faintly. She didn't want Nye Tian to have a conflict with Sunluo Temple because of her. Nye Tian thought for a moment and finally nodded in agreement. He had a deal with Sunluo 7 Nights, but he didn't want Rui Qianyu to be involved. He could vaguely guess that what Sunluo 7 Nights wanted him to do next wouldn't be simple. After a short while, Nye Tian, Rain, and Thousand Leaves arrived at the Sunluo Palace. A tall and sturdy figure was standing at the top of the palace. His aura was vast and boundless like the sea, causing people to look up to him in awe. "You're here, Nyetian." Sunluo's 7 knights slowly turned around, a faint smile appearing at the corner of his mouth, as he looked at Nyetian with a burning gaze. "Hall Lord," Nyetian replied coolly, but when he sensed Sunluo's 7 knights with his divine sense, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He could sense that Sunluo's 7 knights had reached the early paramount god level, and his aura was several times stronger than before. The last time Nyetian saw Sunluo's 7 knights, he was still a peak over god. But in just a few days, he had reached the paramount god level. It seemed that the Sunluo medallion had played a key role in Sunluo's 7 knights' advancement. "I didn't expect you to barge into the Ghost King Palace, Nyetian," Sunluo's 7 knights said with a faint smile. He looked Nyetian up and down with a strange look in his eyes. Inwardly, he was shocked by Nyetian's sudden increase in strength. He was even more convinced that it had been a wise decision to make a deal with Nyetian. Nyetian and Windbu had barged into the Ghost King Palace and rescued Rui Qianyu. That had surprised Sunluo's 7 knights greatly. He had fulfilled his promise to help Nyetian save Rui Qianyu, and now it was time for Nyetian to help him. "Hall Lord, let's get down to business." He didn't want to beat around the bush with Sunluo's 7 knights. It was better to be simple and direct. "All right." Sunluo's 7 knights nodded with a smile and said, "What I want you to do next is actually very simple. Enter a different space and participate in a forbidden hunt." "Alternate dimension? Forbidden hunt?" Nyetian frowned at Sunluo's 7 knights' words. He couldn't help but feel nervous. The more relaxed Sunluo's 7 knights sounded, the more complicated the matter was. Chapter 1696. In Sunluo Hall, Nyetian's brows furrowed when he heard Sunluo's 7 knights mention the alternate dimension and the forbidden hunt. He glanced at Rui Qianyu with a gloomy gaze. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with Rui Qianyu, but Sunluo's 7 knights asked Rui Qianyu to come to Sunluo Hall. It was obvious that this was premeditated. Nyetian guessed that Sunluo's 7 knights wanted Rui Qianyu to participate in the alternate dimension's forbidden hunt. Thinking of this, Nyetian's expression became gloomy. He knew that this forbidden hunt would be extremely dangerous, so he didn't want Rui Qianyu to take the risk. "Sir Temple Lord, what do you want me to do? Just say it." Nyetian frowned and stared at Sunluo's 7 knights with a cold expression. "Nyetian, do you know what kind of place the Sunluo Ghost Domain is?" Unexpectedly, Sunluo's 7 knights didn't say it directly and asked. "The Sunluo Ghost Domain is a forbidden area of the God-stunning domain." Nyetian was stunned for a moment before replying. "The God-stunning domain?" Sunluo's 7 knights looked at Nyetian with a strange smile and said, "The Sunluo Ghost Domain doesn't belong to the God-stunning domain. Haven't you noticed? The space-time of the Sunluo Ghost Domain is even more stable than the God-stunning domain." Nyetian frowned and couldn't help but ponder. He did notice that the space-time of the Sunluo Ghost Domain was a bit strange. It was much more stable than the God-stunning domain, comparable to the upper realms. However, there were many space-time vortexes in the sky above this space-time. They were all space-time gates that led to unknown areas. Moreover, what puzzled Nyetian was that the 2 major forces of the Sunluo Ghost Domain, Sunluo Temple and Ghost King Palace, were far stronger than the 12 palaces of the God-stunning domain. With their strength, why would they stay in a place like the Sunluo Ghost Domain? They could easily enter the God-stunning domain and compete with the 12 palaces. Nyetian, the Sunluo Ghost region is far more complicated than what you see. The corners of Sunluo's 7 knights' lips curled into a strange smile as he said, "The Sunluo Ghost region is connected to countless worlds. There are many alternate dimensions that have existed since ancient times. Not only do these alternate dimensions contain many secrets that would drive cultivators crazy, but there are also many mysterious forces within them. You won't be able to find another place like this even in the 9 realms. After saying that, Limitless 7 Knights looked at Nie Tian with a playful smile. Nie Tian frowned. He didn't expect that there were so many secrets hidden in the Shinra Ghost region. Dark Azura Hall and Ghost King Palace controlled the Sunluo Ghost Domain and were unwilling to leave. So it turned out that it was because of those ancient alternate dimensions. Nie Tian, do you know how big the Sunluo Ghost Domain was hundreds of thousands of years ago? Sunluo 7 Knights suddenly laughed and asked again. Nie Tian shook his head. I don't know. Sunluo 7 Knights smiled faintly and said, hundreds of thousands of years ago, the Sunluo Ghost Domain was only a few thousand miles in circumference. Now it's over 50,000 miles in circumference. Its territory has increased by more than 10 times. Furthermore, it didn't occupy the God-shocking domain's space. Instead, it expanded its own space. Nie Tian frowned. He was shocked. The space of the Sunluo Ghost Domain was indeed strange. Could expand on its own. Lord Hall Master, you must have a reason for telling me all this. Just say it. Nie Tian took a deep breath and asked Sunluo 7 Knights. These things were most likely the secrets of the Sunluo Ghost Domain. Sunluo 7 Knights definitely wouldn't tell Nie Tian for nothing. Nie Tian, what I want to tell you is that above the Sunluo Ghost Domain is a space-time ocean that leads to countless worlds. There is a space-time gate that leads to an alternate dimension, the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts. What I want you to do is to enter the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts and participate in the 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt. Sunluo 7 Knights did not beat around the bush and spoke in a deep voice. Forbidden Land of Martial Arts? The 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt? Nie Tian frowned as he pondered Sunluo 7 Knights' words. The Forbidden Land of Martial Arts was the alternate dimension's name, and the 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt was the hunting competition that Nie Tian wanted to participate in. The Forbidden Land of Martial Arts is an alternate dimension from the immemorial era. It is a world of a higher level than the upper realms. Sunluo 7 Knights knew that Nie Tian had a lot of questions in his mind. With a faint smile, he said, the Sunluo Ghost Realm is actually a subsidiary world of the Forbidden Land of Martialism, just like how the God-Stunning Realm has many subsidiary worlds. The Forbidden Land of Martial Arts is normally closed and cultivators from subsidiary worlds are forbidden from entering. However, every 10,000 years, the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts will open once. Open? Nie Tian was taken aback. He said, it's for the 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt, right? He had more or less understood. The Forbidden Land of Martial Arts was a world of a higher level than realms. The Sunluo Ghost Domain was only a subsidiary world of the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts, just like how the Heaven Realm and God Realm were subsidiaries of the God-Shocking Domain. Similarly, just like how the cultivators from the Heaven Realm and God Realm all wanted to enter realms, the cultivators from the Sunluo Ghost Domain also wanted to enter the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts. Unfortunately, the gate of time and space to enter the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts was closed. It would only open once every 10,000 years. As for why the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts would open, it was definitely because of the 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt. Yes. Sunluo 7 Knights nodded and said, the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts is ruled by a powerful force, the 9 Infant Heaven. The 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt is organized by the 9 Infant Heaven. When the 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt begins, the 9 Infant Heaven will select 18 subsidiary worlds from the countless subsidiary worlds and allow 10 cultivators from each world to enter the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts to participate in the 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt. I understand. Nie Tian smiled faintly and immediately reacted. He said, the Sunluo Ghost Domain has been selected for the 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt this time, right? Sunluo 7 Knights nodded with a smile and said, the Sunluo Ghost Domain is the lucky winner of the 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt this time. The Sunluo Hall and the Ghost King Palace each have 5 quotas to enter the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts. Nye Tian's eyebrows furrowed as his face darkened. The Sunluo Ghost Domain had 10 quotas. The Ghost King Palace and the Sunluo Hall each had 5 quotas. This was also the reason why Sunluo 7 Knights asked Rui Qianyu to come here. He wanted Rui Qianyu to participate in the 9-infant forbidden hunt. Nye Tian did not know what the conditions to participate in the 9-infant forbidden hunt were, but his first reaction was, Rui Qianyu could not participate in the 9-infant forbidden hunt because it was too dangerous. The Sunluo Ghost Domain was only a subsidiary world of the Forbidden Land of Martial Arts. Who knew how powerful the other subsidiary worlds were? Seeing Nye Tian's nervous reaction, Sunluo 7 Knights nodded with a smile and said, Nye Tian, the 9-infant forbidden hunt only allows warriors below the age of 10,000 to participate. So, you are the best candidate. As for Lady Ryu, she will not participate. Before Sunluo 7 Knights could finish, Nye Tian interrupted him. Don't rush to make a decision. Let me finish first. Sunluo 7 Knights was not angry at being interrupted by Nye Tian. Instead, he laughed and said, Lady Ryu has the rainbow pupils. If she participates in the 9-infant forbidden hunt, she will have a huge advantage. So what? Nye Tianling replied coldly. He did not care what advantages Rui Qianyu had. He just did not want her to take the risk. Chapter 1697. Power of Blood Devour. Nye Tian's eyes trembled when he heard Sunluo 7 Knights mention the power of Blood Devour. Rui Qianyu had opened her 5th pupil. The power of Blood Devour was in a berserk state and was constantly devouring her blood energy. Nye Tian didn't know how to get rid of the 9-colored pupil's blood power for good. After calming down, Nye Tian asked in a deep voice, Sect Master, what are you trying to say? Although the 9-infant forbidden hunt is cruel, the winner can make a request to the 9-infant heaven. Sunluo 7 Knights smiled strangely and looked at Nye Tian with an evil gaze. 200,000 years ago, the Sunluo Ghost region was chosen by the 9-infant heaven. I was fortunate enough to participate in the 9-infant forbidden hunt. There, I once met a martial artist with 7 pupils and 9 colored pupils. 7 pupils! Hearing Sunluo 7 Knights' words, Nye Tian's eyes trembled and his expression became shocked. Other than Rui Qianyu, Nye Tian had never seen a martialist with 3 pupils and 9 pupils. He could not believe that there was someone in this world who could open 7 pupils. Hall Master, are you serious? Nye Tian frowned and his face darkened. Sunluo 7 Knights is not someone who speaks without thinking. Sunluo 7 Knights' face darkened and he said coldly. Nye Tian could not help but fall silent. With Sunluo 7 Knights' status, he would not lie. When I saw that martialist with 9 pupils, I did not sense the power of Blood Devour on him. Therefore, I guessed that he must know a way to resolve the power of Blood Devour. If Miss Rain participates in the 9-headed infant forbidden hunt and wins, she can make a request for the people of the 9-headed infant heaven to help her completely dispel the power of the Blood Devour, Sunluo 7 Knights said solemnly when he saw Nye Tian hesitating. Nye Tian's eyes flickered. He could not make a decision. The 9-infant forbidden hunt was both a crisis and an opportunity for Rui Qianyu. I'm in. At this moment, Rui Qianyu suddenly took a step forward and said with determination in her eyes. Rui. Nye Tian was stunned. He didn't expect Rui Qianyu to make a decision so quickly. Nye Tian, this is an opportunity for me, I can't give it up. Rui Qianyu looked at Nye Tian, her lips curved into a gentle smile as she spoke. Nye Tian nodded. Since Rui Qianyu had made up her mind, he couldn't stop her. Very good. Sunluo 7 Knights smiled faintly, his eyes flashing with intense joy. Nye Tian reckoned that if the Jiu Ying Forbidden Hunt won, Sunluo 7 Knights would definitely benefit greatly. Otherwise, the latter wouldn't be so happy. Hall Master, please tell us the rules of the 9 infants hunting prohibition. Nye Tian became cold and his expression was much calmer. The 9 infants hunting prohibition. Everyone is a hunter, and everyone is also a prey. Sun Luo's 7 knights' lips twitched as he said, the 9 infants hunting prohibition does not target others, but everyone who participates except you. Nie Tian frowned and his expression darkened. He said, isn't this forcing all participants to kill each other? Yes. Sun Luo's 7 knights nodded and said, the 9 infants hunting prohibition has no time limit. When there are only 9 participants left, the 9 infants hunting prohibition will automatically end. The 9 people who survive will be the victors of the 9 infants hunting prohibition. I see. Nie Tian nodded slightly. It turned out that the 9 infant forbidden hunt was a blatant massacre between martial artists. The 9 infants hunting prohibition only allows warriors below the age of 10,000 to participate. However, all the participants are the top geniuses from the affiliated worlds of the forbidden land of martialism. Therefore, most of them are at the level of overgod, and there might even be powerful experts. Sun Luo's 7 knights reminded Nie Tian. Nie Tian's gaze trembled as he agreed with him. There were indeed very few warriors who reached the paramount realm before the age of 10,000. Nie Tian's father, Nie Fenghua, reached the paramount realm before the age of 10,000. His 6th uncle, Nie Feiyu, might also reach the paramount realm before the age of 10,000. However, Nie Fenghua and Nie Feiyu were the top geniuses of the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Even in the 9 major realms, there were very few who could compare to them. There were very few paramount gods below the age of 10,000, but that did not mean there were none. There might be such a warrior in the 9 infants hunting prohibition. Why me and Rui Qianyu? Nie Tian asked with a frown. With his and Rui Qianyu's strength, they would definitely be at the bottom of the 9 infants hunting prohibition. However, Sun Luo's 7 knights was very confident in them. It was a little strange. Because you two have an advantage over other warriors. Sun Luo's 7 knights smiled strangely and said, the 9 infants hunting prohibition is in the 9 infants mountain range. The entire mountain range is enveloped by a powerful martial arts restriction. Under the restriction, warriors cannot use their Yuan meridians or godheads. Cannot use their Yuan meridians or godheads. Nie Tian was stunned. He then blurted out, doesn't that mean that the battle between warriors can only be decided by the strength of their martial body? Not being able to use their Yuan meridians or godheads meant that warriors could not use martial skills. They could not even use their Yuan meridians or spirit power. They could only use the purest power of their martial body. Yes. Sun Luo's 7 knights smiled faintly. He looked at Nie Tian with bright eyes and said, Nie Tian, although you only have the strength of a peak middle god, your martial body is much stronger than other warriors of the same level. It is definitely not weaker than an ordinary overgod. Nie Tian nodded slightly. His martial body was indeed very strong. The supreme dragon vein, the power of 600 billion stars, the fiend god origin embryo, the 3 great forbidden skills, and the 3 evil sword vein made his martial body unbelievably strong. At this moment, Sun Luo's 7 knights looked at Rui Qianyu and said, Rui Qianyu has the 9 color pupils. Although she cannot use her Yuan meridians or godheads, her 9 color pupils are not restricted. Therefore, she has a greater advantage than you. This. Nie Tian's expression stiffened and he couldn't help but gasp. Rui Qianyu's 9 color pupils were not restricted. This was very terrifying in the 9 infants hunting prohibition. Even the current Nie Tian could not fight against Rui Qianyu's 9 color pupils without using his dragon vein and demonic aura. From the looks of it, Rui Qianyu indeed had a great advantage in participating in the 9 infants hunting prohibition. After a while, Nie Tian's expression returned to normal and he asked, My lord, when will the 9 infants hunting prohibition start? In 5 days. Sun Luo's 7 knights smiled faintly. Nie Tian nodded slightly and was about to leave. Wait a moment. You still have to meet a few people. Sun Luo's 7 knights stopped Nie Tian. Then, he looked out of the hall and said, "They're here." Nie Tian's gaze froze. He looked outside the hall and saw 3 figures walking towards the hall. Who are they? Nie Tian looked at the 3 figures and asked in a deep voice. Your companions. Sun Luo's 7 knights replied with a smile. These 3 figures were the people who were going to participate in the 9 infants hunting prohibition with Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu. The 3 figures were getting closer. They were 2 men and 1 woman. The 3 of them maintained a certain distance from each other. It seemed like they did not know each other. Chapter 1698. The handsome young man stared at Nie Tian in disdain. He did not hide his disdain at all. His voice was very loud, but it was extremely ear-piercing as it rang through the hall. The other man and woman looked at Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu. They also showed disdain in their eyes. Nie Tian looked at the 3 of them. They were not very old, probably around a few thousand years old. They all seemed very young. The 3 of them were very powerful. They were all overgods. The handsome young man who spoke first was a late overgod, the cold woman in violet was a mid-overgod, and the skinny young man was also a mid-overgod. They were indeed talented to be able to possess such strength at such a young age. Nie Tian, Rui Qianyu, let me introduce you. These are your companions, Jiang Qizhi, Chen Ruoi, and Gue Wuchan. Sun Luo's 7 knights sensed the disdain the 3 of them showed towards Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu, but he acted like he knew nothing and introduced them enthusiastically. Nie Tian's eyes sank slightly. He had never thought that Sun Luo's 7 knights would have already chosen the other 3. The 3 of them were indeed much more powerful than Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu. Companions. The handsome young man, Jiang Qizhi, smiled cold. He looked at Nie Tian scornfully and said, Do I need a piece of trash who's a god as a companion? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as a sliver of darkness flashed across his face. He said nothing. He only stared at Jiang Qizhi cold. Trash, do you not accept it? Jiang Qizhi sensed the coldness in Nie Tian's eyes, but he sneered instead. The disdain in his eyes grew. Nie Tian scanned past Jiang Qizhi with the senses of his soul. Afterwards, he sensed a familiar presence. His lips twitched and he said, You're from the Jiang family? Jiang family. Nie Tian was talking about the Xingtian Alliance's Jiang family. Nie Tian had fought with the Jiang family back in the god shepherding domain, so he remembered the Jiang family's Xingtian bloodline. The Jiang Qizhi in front of him actually had a very powerful Xingtian bloodline in his body. Clearly, he was a member of the Jiang clan. The Xingtian bloodline was one of the 4 supreme ancient bloodlines. It greatly enhanced a cultivator's martial body. It was normal for Sun Luo's 7 knights to look for the Jiang family. Nie Tian guessed that Jiang Qizhi should be from a branch of the Jiang family. It had to be said that Jiang Qizhi's talent was very good. With his strength, it was enough for him to enter the main house. You don't deserve to know. Jiang Qizhi smiled cold and arrogant. Nie Tian's face suddenly turned cold and gloomy. Can it be that a piece of god trash wants to fight against me? Jiang Qizhi stared cold at Nie Tian, his eyes filled with extreme disdain. In his eyes, Nie Tian was just an ant, a piece of trash. He really didn't understand why Sun Luo's 7 knights would look for such a person to participate in the 9 infant forbidden hunt. Some mad dogs will bite if they are not taught a lesson. Nie Tian's expression was as cold as steel. He raised his eyes and looked at Sun Luo's 7 knight. Jiang Qizhi was, after all, someone found by Sun Luo's 7 knights. Therefore, it was better to ask for his opinion. Since the 2 of you want to have a spar, I have no objections. Sun Luo's 7 knights smiled faintly and said, But you both know the rules of the 9 infant forbidden hunt. Why don't the 2 of you use your origin veins and divine sparks? What do you think? Fine. Before Sun Luo's 7 knights' voice faded away, Jiang Qizhi let out a low roar. Then, his figure flashed and landed outside the hall. Nie Tian couldn't help but smile. Sun Luo's 7 knights was helping him. If it was a direct battle, Nie Tian would definitely have to use some tricks to defeat Jiang Qiji. But if it was just a competition of martial physique, Nie Tian wasn't afraid at all. Then, everyone left the main hall and went outside. Nie Tian and Jiang Qiji landed on the square of the main hall and stood facing each other. Nie Tian, I want to see how strong your martial physique is. Sun Luo's 7 knights smirked and thought to himself. Rui Qianyu's pretty face was nervous. She couldn't help but worry for Nie Tian. The other two, Chen Ruoi and Gui Wuchan, looked playful. They were waiting to see a good show. In their opinion, Nie Tian and Jiang Qiji's battle was simply courting death. A middle god wanting to compete with a main god in martial physique was no different from hitting a rock with an egg. Trash. If I don't beat the sh*t out of you today, I'll consider it as you shitting your pants. Jiang Qiji stared coldly at Nie Tian and bellowed furiously. He wanted to use his battle with Nie Tian to establish his prestige. Only after entering the forbidden land of martialism could he become the leader of the 5. You want to make an example out of me? Nie Tian looked at Jiang Qiji. He could tell what the latter was thinking with a single glance. Jiang Qiji wanted to continue suppressing him to establish his prestige. Unfortunately, between Nie Tian and Jiang Qiji, it wasn't certain who would be the one to be killed. I'll take your life with one punch. In the next moment, Jiang Qiji suddenly moved. He charged madly at Nie Tian. Every step he took would leave a deep hole in the ground. Overgod martial artists were already extremely powerful after being strengthened by the laws of overgods. Just a casual punch from them was enough to split mountains and shatter rock. Nie Tian sensed Jiang Qiji's wild presence, but his face was completely sunken. He did not show any emotions at all. Jiang Qiji possesses the Xingtian bloodline. Although he's only a late overgod, his martial body is even more terrifying than peak overgods. This kid is only a middle god. He'll definitely die from that punch. Gui Wuchan could not help but smile when he saw Jiang Qiji charge over. He said sinisterly. Yeah, the light in Chen Ruoi's eyes flickered as she nodded. In their opinion, it was impossible for Nie Tian to receive Jiang Qiji's punch. In the next moment, just when Jiang Qiji's punch was about to land on Nie Tian's face, the latter suddenly punched out to receive it. Bang! In a single instance, the two fists collided, and the sound of metal colliding rang out. Afterwards, there was the terrifying sound of bones breaking, and a figure was directly blown away amidst a flash of blood. He shrieked miserably in the air. At that moment, everyone frowned. They all stared at the square as disbelief and shock filled their faces. The person on the ground was none other than Jiang Qiji. One of his fists was dripping with blood and completely deformed. Even his white bones were exposed. On the other hand, Nie Tian remained where he was. He was unscathed. How was this possible? Jiang Qiji had punched out first, yet he had been sent flying by a single punch from Nie Tian. Even his fist had shattered. If they had not witnessed it with their own eyes, they would have never believed it. This! Sun Luo's 7 knights sucked in a breath of cold air. He felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that Nie Tian's martial body was strong, but he didn't expect it to be this strong. He had defeated a late overgod with the Xingtian bloodline in a single punch. Nie Tian's martial body was terrifyingly powerful. At this moment, Nie Tian took a step forward and arrived beside Jiang Qiji. He glanced past him coldly and said, "You said I'm trash, yet you can't even block a single punch from me. I don't think I need to say who's trash now, do I?" With that, Nie Tian turned around and left. He could not even be bothered to look at Jiang Qiji. Jiang Qiji had been defeated by a single punch from Nie Tian. It was obvious who was trash. Jiang Qiji looked at Nie Tian's back as his eyes trembled violently. Fury surged within him. Chapter 1699. Boom. Up in midair, Jiang Qiji's fist smashed down towards Nie Tian with the momentum of a mountain. He was defeated by Nie Tian with a single punch and Nie Tian's merciless mockery. He lost his mind and wanted to kill Nie Tian directly. He didn't expect Nie Tian's martial body to be so strong. He couldn't compete with it at all. Heaven's punishment armor! Gui Wukan and Chen Ruai exclaimed when they saw the armored giant around Jiang Qiji. The armored giant surrounding Jiang Qiji surged with a surging power that filled the air, emitting a powerful and oppressive aura. No one expected Jiang Qiji to be so vicious. He went against Sun Luo Chie's words and directly used his primordial meridian and godhead to kill Nie Tian. Jiang Qiji was in the air, but there was a sinister smile on his face. He didn't think that Nie Tian could block his punch. Right at this moment, Nie Tian's body shook, and a terrifying sword aura soared into the sky. The sword radiance bloomed 10,000 meters away, and the surging sword intent was like a raging sea, blasting towards the sky. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The fist shadow and the sword shadow collided. The terrifying power collided and exploded in all directions. Chi chi chi. An ear-piercing sound was heard. Waves of violent chi surged in the air. It was extremely terrifying. Nie Tian's body trembled slightly. He took a few steps back, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Jiang Qiji's figure froze in the air, and he looked at him with a face full of horror. His eyes were filled with extreme disbelief. He didn't expect that Nie Tian could block his punch. He had activated the heaven-punishing armor. This punch of his was powerful enough to shatter a mountain range. How could Nie Tian, a mere medium god, possibly block it? This! Gui Wukan and Chen Ruoi, who were watching from the side, gasped. Their faces were full of shock. The terror of Nie Tian was beyond their imagination. Not only did Nie Tian completely crush Jiang Qiji in terms of martial body, even when the latter used the Xingtian armor, he was able to block it with a single sword strike. This kind of strength was unimaginable. If Nie Tian possessed the strength of a main god and was able to fight against Jiang Qiji, Gui Wukan and Chen Ruai could still accept it, albeit reluctantly. However, Nie Tian was only a god. He was not even a greater god. How could he fend off Jiang Qiji, a late overgod? Nie Tian's performance subverted their understanding of martial arts. At this moment, Nie Tian looked at Jiang Qiji, and his lips twitched slightly. He thought, this guy really is a late overgod after all. If it weren't for the essence of sword, his punch would have been enough to heavily injure me. Although Nie Tian managed to withstand Jiang Qiji's punch, he was injured. Before activating the three great forbidden techniques, Nie Tian would have a hard time fighting Jiang Qiji head-on. The three forbidden techniques were his strongest trump cards, and he couldn't use them carelessly. That's impossible. At this moment, Jiang Qiji's eyes flickered with shock. What replaced it was an intense killing intent. After which, his silhouette flickered as the aura around him surged up crazily. A violent chi gushed into every inch of space, as though it wanted to tear the space apart. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. Jiang Qiji had actually made up his mind to kill. Although Jiang Qiji was very arrogant, Nie Tian had no plans to kill him. Unfortunately, Jiang Qiji did not think that way. He felt a great threat from Nie Tian, so he had to kill him. Nie Tian's eyes flickered slightly, and a sliver of killing intent flowed out. If Jiang Qiji insisted on killing him, Nie Tian would only have one choice, and that was to stop the killing by killing. Jiang Qiji was very powerful, but if Nie Tian used the three great forbidden techniques and used the trine demonic sword range, it would be enough to kill Jiang Qiji in a single stroke. Damned brat, die! In the next moment, Jiang Qiji's cold face twisted. He roared out furiously, and with a single movement, he actually struck out. Bang! However, at this moment, the void suddenly shook strangely, and then a terrifying force descended. After a muffled sound, Jiang Qiji's figure directly flew out and smashed heavily on the ground, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. The others were stunned and looked at Sun Luo's 7 knights in unison. The one who attacked was him. Although Sun Luo's 7 knights had just become a supreme god not long ago, it was still easy for him to suppress Jiang Qiji. Enough! Sun Luo's 7 knights took a step forward, and his aura was like a rainbow. He looked at Jiang Qiji with cold eyes, and said in a cold voice, "Today's matter ends here." Jiang Qiji crawled up, shook off the blood on his body, and stared at Nie Tian viciously, but did not dare to act rashly again. With a faint smile, Nie Tian let out a long breath. He did not want to use the 3 great forbidden techniques, and killing Jiang Qiji would not do him any good. Sun Luo's 7 knights stopping Jiang Qiji was the best result. Seeing that the battle had been stopped, Rui Qinyu arrived beside Nie Tian and asked nervously, "Nie Tian, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Nie Tian smiled lightly. The injuries he had suffered earlier were simply nothing to him. "Nie Tian, you really did not disappoint me." Sun Luo's 7 knights landed beside Nie Tian and smiled lightly. Earlier, Sun Luo's 7 knights had deliberately attacked a bit later. He wanted to see exactly how powerful Nie Tian's battle power was. Earlier, Feng Buyu had told him that Nie Tian had fought against over a dozen overgods by himself. At that time, he had doubted it. However, after seeing Nie Tian's current performance, he firmly believed it. Furthermore, Sun Luo's 7 knights could sense that there was an extremely terrifying power in Nie Tian's body. If that power had exploded, Jiang Qiji would likely have lost his life. "Lord Palace Master, since the 5 of us are going to enter the forbidden land of martialism together, we need a leader." Nie Tian smiled lightly. His gaze swept past Jiang Qiji, Gui Wukan, and Chen Rui, and he said indifferently, "I hope that I'm the leader." "I'm the leader." Nie Tian's voice was very calm, but it was filled with a domineering aura that no one could defy. He could tell that Jiang Qiji and the other 2 were not easy to deal with. In order for the 9 neonate forbidden hunt to proceed smoothly, it was necessary for him to establish his position as the leader. Nie Tian did this to better protect Rui Qinyu's safety. When Sun Luo's 7 knights heard Nie Tian's words, he could not help but frown. Then, he laughed and looked at Jiang Qiji and the others. He asked, "What do you think about Nie Tian being your leader?" Jiang Qiji's eyes trembled. The fury in his eyes became even more intense, but he did not say anything. He had lost to Nie Tian and no longer had the right to speak. "I agree." Unexpectedly, Gui Wukan stood out and agreed with Nie Tian being the leader. He said, "During the 9 neonate forbidden hunt, warriors can only use the power of their martial bodies. Nie Tian's martial body is stronger than Xing Tian's bloodline. Of course, he has the right to be the leader." "I also agree." Chen Rui's eyes flickered and she nodded in agreement. Rui Qinyu did not say anything. She would definitely stand on Nie Tian's side. "Good. From now on, your team of 5 will be led by Nie Tian. After entering the forbidden land of martialism, everyone must listen to his orders." Sun Luo's 7 knights smiled indifferently. His gaze towards Nie Tian was mixed with a trace of complexity. Jiang Qiji stared coldly at Nie Tian. His expression was extremely ugly. Originally, he thought that the position of leader was his. He did not expect that Nie Tian would appear out of nowhere and snatch the position away. Chapter 1700. Nie Tian saw all of Jiang Qiji's reactions, but he said nothing and pretended he did not see anything. He did not intend to kill Jiang Qiji right now, but if Jiang Qiji obstructed him during the 9 infant forbidden hunt, he would not show any mercy. "Everyone, go back and prepare. In 5 days, I will take you to the forbidden land of martialism." Sun Luo's 7 knights smiled faintly, indicating that Nie Tian and the others could leave. Nie Tian and Rui Qinyu did not stay any longer. They turned around and left. Nie Tian glanced at Gui Wuchan and thought of something. He hesitated, but did not say it. Before the Sword Elder left, he had asked Nie Tian to find a person called Gui Wu Kuang Sha in the God Investiture region. Nie Tian guessed that Gui Wuchan and Gui Wu Kuang Sha might be related. However, he did not ask directly. It would instead raise Gui Wuchan's suspicions. After returning to the courtyard, Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu spoke for a while before returning to his room. I wonder what kind of people we'll meet in the 9-infant forbidden hunt. Nie Tian mumbled and smiled faintly. He was not nervous at all. Instead, he was a little expectant. According to Sun Luo's 7 Nights, the forbidden land of martialism was a world even higher than the upper realms. It had countless subsidiary worlds, and the Sun Luo Ghost region was only one of them. Every time, 18 subsidiary worlds would participate in the 9-infant forbidden hunt. Each subsidiary world would send 10 cultivators, so there would be a total of 180 people. In the end, only 9 people would remain. The chance of survival was not too low. However, Nie Tian knew that those who could participate in the 9-infant forbidden hunt were the peak geniuses of their subsidiary world. Every single one of them was a genius among geniuses. It was not easy to survive among 180 people. Fortunately, there were martial restrictions in the 9-infant forbidden hunt. Cultivators could not use their Yuan meridians or godhead. As a result, cultivators with powerful martial bodies had a great advantage. Even without using the 3 forbidden techniques, Nie Tian's martial body was equivalent to peak overgods. If he used the 3 forbidden techniques, he could fend off overgod. But that was just a comparison of martial bodies. If Nie Tian were to fight a paramount god right now, he would be killed in a single move. Even if it was an expert like Jiang Qiji, it would be very difficult for Nie Tian to defeat him without using the 3 great forbidden techniques. Paramount gods really are strong, Yang Qi murmured. Thinking back to how he had sent Jiang Qiji flying with a single move, Nie Tian couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. After all, he was still far from being a peak paramount god. Only by continuously becoming stronger could Nie Tian survive and protect his family and friends. Nie Tian, this Jiao-ing forbidden hunt is interesting. At that moment, Fat Cat appeared and chuckled. If you can win, you should think about what you want. 7-leaf dragon tongue orchid, Nie Tian blurted out without hesitation. If he won, he definitely wanted the 7-leaf dragon tongue orchid. Fat Cat looked at Nie Tian and rolled her eyes. Heaven of 9 Infants is a powerful organization from ancient times. If you win the Jiao-ing forbidden hunt and only want a 7-leaf dragon tongue orchid, wouldn't that be looking down on them? Nie Tian's face darkened. However, Fat Cat's words made sense. Heaven of 9 Infants was a powerful organization that controlled the forbidden land of martialism. They even had cultivators with 7 pupils and 9 colored pupils. Nie Tian estimated that Heaven of 9 Infants was even stronger than the Holy Parliament and the Wind and Cloud Alliance. It was indeed inappropriate for such a powerful organization to only want a 7-leaf dragon tongue orchid. Then what do I want? Nie Tian was stunned. He was at a loss. I already have an answer. I'll tell you in the future. Fat Cat chuckled and disappeared. Nie Tian was stunned. The Jiao-ing forbidden hunt hadn't even started. Wasn't it too early to think about what would happen after he won? Lian Jiufeng, Nie Tian became cold. A name suddenly appeared in his mind, causing him to frown. When he first entered Sun Luo City, he met Lian Jiufeng and the others. He didn't know why they came to Sun Luo Ghost region. Could it be? Nie Tian's expression changed. He suddenly realized something and exclaimed, Jiao-ing forbidden hunt. He suddenly thought that Lian Jiufeng came to Sun Luo Ghost region for the Jiao-ing forbidden hunt. Previously, the Ghost King Palace Master wanted to make a deal with Nie Tian, but Nie Tian rejected. Nie Tian guessed that the Ghost King Palace Master wanted him to participate in the Jiao-ing forbidden hunt. The Ghost King Palace Master also had 5 spots for the forbidden hunt. Therefore, it wasn't strange for him to cooperate with the nets above snares below. The more Nye Tian thought about it, the more believable it seemed. Lien Jiufeng probably came for the Jiu Ying forbidden hunt. After that, he didn't think too much. Everything would be revealed when the Jiu Ying forbidden hunt began. 5 days later, Nye Tian walked out of the room. His aura was much stronger than a few days ago, but his strength was still at the peak of middle god. It was difficult to advance to the next level in the godly state. Nye Tian's strength improved very quickly before because he had all kinds of fortuitous encounters and fused different kinds of powers. If he cultivated normally, it would take him at least several years to break through to high god. Rui Qianyu's figure appeared. Rain and Tawny stood behind her. Rain's consciousness hadn't completely recovered, but it was much better than a few days ago. Nye Tian, Qianye, be careful. Tawny didn't know what Nye Tian and Rui Qianyu were going to do, but she could feel that they were going to do something very dangerous. Don't worry. Nye Tian smiled faintly. He had already informed Wind Buyu to help take care of Tawny and the others. Although Wind Buyu was a little crazy, he was a trustworthy person. Nye Tian asked Tawny and the others to stay in Sunluo Temple for the time being. He then passed the Wind Cloud badge to her, and told her that she could take it to the Nye family or the Wind and Cloud Alliance if anything happened. After everything was arranged, Nye Tian and Rui Qianyu left together. Then, they met up with the other 3 and followed Sunluo's 7 Knights and Wind Buyu to the sky above Sunluo Ghost Region. In the sky above Sunluo Ghost Region, the aura of spacetime was extremely strong. Terrifying spacetime vortexes surged in the air, and spacetime storms swirled rapidly. They were like abysses that could devour everything. Every spacetime vortex was a spacetime gate. No one knew where they would lead to. This must be the sea of spacetime. Nye Tian mumbled in his heart. He sensed the surrounding spacetime vortexes and felt the origin embryo space in his body become agitated, as if it had sensed something. That's the spacetime gate that leads to the forbidden land of martialism, Sunluo's 7 Knights said in a deep voice as he pointed at a huge spacetime vortex in the distance. Nye Tian looked at the spacetime vortex and felt the intense aura of spacetime. His eyes couldn't help but shudder. He had seen spacetime vortexes before, but they were incomparable to the one before him. The surging aura of spacetime was extremely violent, as if it could tear everything apart. He really didn't know how it was possible to enter such a terrifying spacetime vortex. Temple Lord Sunluo, long time no see. At that moment, a faintly discernible voice resounded in the sky. Then, a figure appeared and stood not far away from Nye Tian and the others. Ghost King Palace Lord. Nye Tian's eyes trembled when he heard the voice. He immediately guessed the person's identity. He suddenly turned around and saw a familiar ghost mask. There were several figures standing behind the mask. One of them was not unfamiliar. It was Lien Jiufeng. Chapter 1701. Nye Tian's eyes trembled when he saw Lien Jiufeng. Although he had guessed that Lien Jiufeng might have come because of the 9 neonate forbidden hunt, he was still shocked when he confirmed it. Nye Tian's eyes flickered. He suddenly discovered that there was an extremely familiar figure behind Lien Jiufeng. It was Luo Zian. Luo Zian, she's here too. Nye Tian was shocked when he saw Luo Zian. He did not expect her to show up here too. Nye Tian, long time no see. Lien Jiufeng also noticed Nye Tian. He took a step forward and looked at Nye Tian with a strange gaze. Lien Jiufeng, I didn't expect to see you here too. Nye Tian replied indifferently. He scanned Lien Jiufeng with his divine sense and found that the latter was already a peak high god. The last time Nye Tian met Lien Jiufeng, he was only a mid-stage high god. He did not expect him to be a peak high god now. His strength had risen very quickly. Nye Tian. At the same time, the Ghost King Palace Master walked over and looked at Nye Tian with a dark gaze. His voice was filled with malice. Lord Palace Master, are you excited to see me? Nye Tian looked at the Ghost King Palace Master with a faint smile and a playful expression. The Ghost King Palace Master's eyes flickered and his body trembled slightly. Nye Tian had ruined his plans against the Mo family and Ouyang family and snatched Rui Qinyu away. The Ghost King Palace Master swore to get revenge for this. The Ghost King Palace Master's hatred for Nye Tian was greater than the sky and deeper than the sea. However, he did not do anything because Sun Luoqie and the others were beside Nye Tian. Ghost King Palace Master, now is not the time to settle personal grudges. At that moment, Sun Luoqie lightly smiled and said, "The forbidden land of martialism is about to open. It won't be too late to settle the grudges between you and Nye Tian after the 9-infant forbidden hunt ends. Nye Tian, I hope you don't die in the forbidden land of martialism," said the Ghost King Palace's palace master coldly as he looked at Nye Tian with killing intent. Nye Tian smiled lightly and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely not disappoint Lord Ghost King. I will definitely safely leave the forbidden land of martialism." Humph! Ghost King Palace Master sneered and no longer looked at Nye Tian. Then, everyone slowly approached the huge space-time vortex. Observing the space-time vortex at such a close distance, Nye Tian could feel how terrifying the space-time storm inside was. Buzzed at. The space-time storm was like a wild beast, releasing strange rumbling sounds. A terrifying aura surged non-stop. It was extremely berserk. Nye Tian estimated that even a peak paramount god might not be able to withstand a space-time storm of this degree. After a while, a ray of white light suddenly appeared in the space-time vortex. It surged outwards and continuously expanded. Gradually, it formed a pillar of light that forcibly tore the space-time vortex apart and tore open a space-time tunnel. The forbidden land of martialism is open. Seeing this, everyone's eyes couldn't help but tremble and burn with passion. As the space-time tunnel formed, several gray-clothed figures appeared on the other side. They slowly walked over and quickly appeared before the crowd. Lord Emissary, Sun Luo Temple Master and Ghost King Palace Master quickly bowed respectfully when they saw the gray-clothed people. The leader of the 3 gray-clothed people was a white-haired old man with a benevolent expression. The other 2 were middle-aged men with respectful expressions. These 3 gray-clothed people were the 9-infant emissaries of the 9-infant heaven. They were responsible for bringing Nye Tian and the others into the forbidden land of martialism. When Nye Tian sensed their strength, his eyes couldn't help but tremble and he cried out inwardly, "They're all paramount gods." The white-haired old man was a mid-stage paramount god, while the other 2 middle-aged men were early-stage paramount gods. Although this kind of strength wasn't at the peak in the 9 realms, they were definitely overlords. After all, Sun Luo Temple Master and Ghost King Palace Master were only early-stage paramount gods. "The 2 of you, are these the 10 contestants this time?" The white-haired old man smiled faintly. Then, his gaze swept past Nye Tian and the others. He couldn't help but smile bitterly, as if he wasn't satisfied with these 10 people. "Sun Luo Temple Master, Ghost King Palace Master, are you trying to brush us off?" A middle-aged man suddenly stepped forward and looked at Sun Luo's 7 knights and Ghost King Palace Master with a cold voice. Sun Luo's 7 knights and Ghost King Palace Master's eyes trembled at the same time. They hurriedly bowed, not daring to speak. "A few of them are fine, but this kid only has the strength of a mid-god. Who does he think he is?" The other middle-aged man also spoke up. His gaze was locked onto Nye Tian as he spoke with a disdainful expression. Nye Tian was stunned. He didn't expect to be looked down upon again. Among the 10 participants, his strength was indeed the weakest. It was no wonder that the middle-aged man was displeased. A mere mid-god wants to participate in the 9 neonate forbidden hunt? Do you think the 9 neonate forbidden hunt is a joke? The middle-aged man roared angrily. "Forget it." At that moment, the white-haired old man waved his hand to stop them. Then, with a bitter smile, he said, "The Sunluo Ghost Realm is a subsidiary world of the forbidden land of martialism. It's not easy to pick out 10 people like them." The middle-aged man's expression darkened, but he didn't say anything else. The white-haired old man couldn't help but look at Nye Tian. He thought to himself, although this kid is weak, he's not old either. He's only in his 20s. With this kind of talent, if he cultivated for a few thousand more years, he would be the perfect candidate to participate in the 9 neonate forbidden hunt. Unfortunately, right now, sigh. The white-haired old man shook his head and smiled. He felt pity for Nye Tian. He was shocked by Nye Tian's talent, but the latter's strength was too weak. Participating in the 9 neonate forbidden hunt right now was equivalent to being cannon fodder. However, Nye Tian didn't reveal any expression from start to finish. This made the white-haired old man a bit surprised. He secretly admired Nye Tian's determination. "Okay, let's enter." Although the white-haired old man wasn't too satisfied with Nye Tian and the others, he still lightly smiled, turned around and stepped into the space-time tunnel. Nye Tian and the others were a bit excited. Then, they followed behind the white-haired old man and entered the space-time tunnel together. The instant they entered the tunnel, Nye Tian immediately felt the surrounding space-time aura change. There was a terrifying space-time storm all around them, but it didn't put any pressure on them. They didn't know what power was used to create this space-time tunnel. It was actually able to withstand such a terrifying space-time storm. It was truly powerful. Boom! Just as Nye Tian and the others entered the space-time tunnel, the entrance of the tunnel immediately closed. Sunluo Hall Master, Ghost King Palace Master, and the others watched the group disappear into the space-time whirlpool. Their eyes were a bit complicated. "Nye Tian, don't disappoint me," Sunluo's 7 Knights said in his heart. He couldn't help but reveal a trace of passion in his eyes. Ghost King Palace Master's eyes were also shining brightly. It seemed that he also had high hopes for Lai Yin Jiufeng and the others. Chapter 1702. Under the white-haired old man's lead, Nye Tian and the others quickly walked out of the space-time tunnel. In an instant, Nye Tian felt that everything in front of him had changed. They had arrived at a whole new world. At that moment they were standing high up in the sky. Looking down, they saw an endless chain of majestic mountains. Huge birds flew past in the sky, letting out mournful cries. Everyone was overjoyed. They had finally arrived at the forbidden land of martial art. "This is the 9 Infant Mountain Range." The white-haired old man smiled. He pointed at the mountain range below and said, "The 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt will be held in the 9 Infant Mountain Range." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He extended his consciousness and faintly felt that the entire mountain range was enveloped by an enormous restriction. The restriction seemed very weak when he first felt it. However, upon closer inspection, he could feel that the restriction contained boundless power. This must be the martial restriction that Sunluo's 7 Knights mentioned, thought Nye Tian as his lips curled up. Everyone looked at the 9 Infant Mountain Range with unconcealable passion in their eyes. "Listen up, the 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt will begin in 10 days. In these 10 days, you can familiarize yourselves with the 9 Infant Mountain Range. If you have any problems, you can look for me or the 2 of them." The white-haired old man swept his gaze across the crowd and said in a deep voice. Everyone's eyes trembled, then became joyful. The 9 Infant Forbidden Hunt would not begin immediately. They still had 10 days to familiarize themselves with everything. That was not bad. "May I ask how I should address you, my lord?" At that moment, Lai Yin Jiufeng suddenly stepped forward and asked with a slight bow. Before the white-haired old man could speak, the middle-aged man behind him stepped forward and said, "Brat, who do you think you are? Do you think you're worthy of knowing Master's name?" "I'm asking this, my lord, not you." Lai Yin Jiufeng was not afraid. Instead, he spoke very calmly. "You." The middle-aged man's face darkened. He was clearly furious and seemed about to explode. The white-haired old man laughed. He then looked at Lai Yin Jiufeng and said, I'm Bai Feng. You can call me Old Bai. Before the 9-infant forbidden hunt officially begins, I will be your protector. I will be responsible for your safety. Thank you, Elder Bai. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled and bowed in thanks. The corners of Nie Tian's lips curled up slightly. This old man called Bai Feng was rather amiable. At that moment, everyone realized that many people had appeared out of thin air in the sky. They were all participants from other subsidiary worlds. Nie Tian sensed that the competitors from the other subsidiary worlds were basically all overgod. Many of them were peak overgods, so their overall strength was much greater than the cultivators from the Shinra Ghost region. He was only a mid-god, and when he stood beside these people, he indeed seemed a little weak. Elder Bai, are the cultivation rooms below prepared for us? At this time, Nie Tian suddenly realized that there were many training rooms on the empty ground below. Even though he was 10,000 meters away, he could still feel the powerful energy from the training rooms. Yes. Bai Feng nodded slightly and said, there are a total of 18 cultivation rooms here, and each of them is of a different level. The concentration of the spirit energy in the best cultivation room is a few hundred times that of the worst cultivation room. But even in the worst training room, the concentration of the spirit power inside is several times thicker than the outside world. In other words, if you can get your hands on the best cultivation room, your cultivation speed over the next 10 days will be faster than if you cultivated in your original world for a few decades or even centuries. That's amazing! The others could not help but exclaim when they heard Bai Feng's words. Then, they looked at the cultivation rooms below with burning eyes. 18 cultivation rooms. There are also 18 subsidiary worlds participating in the 9 neonate forbidden hunt. It looks like they're prepared for us, Lai Yin Jiufeng murmured to himself with a smile. Bai Feng nodded slightly. He seemed to admire Lai Yin Jiufeng very much. Lai Yin Jiufeng was not very strong. He was only a peak high god. He was one of the weakest among all the participants, but his calm and collected personality caught Bai Feng's attention. Moreover, Bai Feng could vaguely feel that there was a terrifying power inside Lai Yin Jiufeng's body. It was a power that even he was slightly wary of. 18 cultivation rooms of different levels. Isn't this asking us to fight over them? Nie Tian smiled bitterly and murmured. The reason why 9 Neonate Heaven had divided the 18 cultivation rooms into different levels was clearly to make the participants of the 18 subsidiary worlds fight over the best cultivation room. Yes. Bai Feng nodded slightly and said, before the 9 Neonate forbidden hunt begins, you can have conflicts with the other participants, but it's best not to kill them. Otherwise, it'll be bad if you anger their protector. Everyone nodded and looked at Bai Feng. Bai Feng was their protector right now. He was responsible for their safety. Nie Tian, which cultivation room should we enter? At this time, Lai Yin Jiufeng came to Nie Tian's side and asked. At least for now, Lai Yin Jiufeng and Nie Tian were both from Sun Luo Ghost Realm, so they could temporarily form an alliance. Fifth. Nie Tian smiled faintly and locked his gaze on the 5th cultivation room. The first cultivation room was obviously the best, but the competition was too great. Every participant would definitely want it. Nie Tian chose the 5th cultivation room. It wasn't the best, but it was definitely not bad either. Moreover, he sensed that the 5th cultivation room's divine intent power was about 100 times denser than the outside world. This was the limit of the divine intent power he could absorb. Even if the concentration of the spirit intent power in the 1st cultivation room was much higher than in the 5th cultivation room, a martial artist's ability to absorb the spirit intent power was limited. An excessively high concentration of spirit intent power, other than making the martial artist feel slightly more comfortable, had no other use. Alright. We'll go to the 5th cultivation room then. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled faintly and agreed with Nie Tian's choice. Old Bai will be going first. Lai Yin Jiufeng turned around and bid farewell to Bai Feng. Then, his figure moved and landed outside the 5th cultivation room. Nie Tian and the others immediately followed behind him and landed at the same time. Bai Feng couldn't help but raise the corner of his lips when he saw the scene below. He murmured, "The 5th cultivation room is a good choice, but the 10 of you are too weak. Even if you enter the 5th cultivation room, you might not be able to keep it." "A bunch of idiots," the middle-aged man behind Bai Feng sneered. He did not hide the disdain in his eyes at all. He said, "This team is at the bottom of the 18 teams. They're looking to die if they think they can take the 5th cultivation room." The corner of Bai Feng's lips twitched. He looked a little embarrassed. Although he was the guardian of the Sunluo Ghost Region's martial artists, he would not make a move unless these people's lives were in danger. More importantly, as a guardian, he only had 3 chances to act. Therefore, he would only save those he admired. As for the life and death of other martial artists, it was not within his scope of consideration. Moreover, there was the ring of life and death here. Chapter 1703. Nie Tian landed outside the 5th cultivation room and surveyed the surroundings. They were currently at the outskirts of the 9-infant mountain range, and there were martial arts restrictions in the air. Therefore, even their vital meridians and godheads were suppressed here, making them unable to use them. Very good, Nie Tian smiled when he sensed the existence of the martial restrictions. This was extremely beneficial to him. "Quick, enter the cultivation room." The others had already lost control of themselves and surged into the cultivation room excitedly. "Qianye, let's go in as well." Nie Tian looked at Rui Qianyu and smiled faintly before entering the cultivation room. The cultivation room was not large. There were a total of 10 places for cultivation. Clearly, it had been prepared beforehand. What dense strength of spirit! The moment he entered the cultivation room, Nie Tian felt that the spirit energy in the air was incomparably dense. It surged crazily, as if it wanted to seep into his body, causing every pore on his body to open up. "Nie Tian, this place is not bad. You can definitely become a higher god in 10 days, the fat cat snickered. "Yes." Nie Tian nodded firmly. "The strength of spirit here is extremely dense. It is indeed a good place to cultivate." Nie Tian was very confident that he would be able to break through into the higher god stage in a few days. "Very good." Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled faintly before preparing to cultivate. "The person inside, get the fuck out here." Right at this moment, a furious roar suddenly resounded, and it was like a thunderclap. Nie Tian and Lai Yin Jiufeng frowned. They could not help but smile bitterly. They never thought trouble would come so soon. Outside the cultivation room, a tall and sturdy figure stood there like an iron tower. Nie Tian and the others walked out of the cultivation room. They could not help but frown when they saw the person before them. Nie Tian sensed the person with the senses of his soul. The person was a late overgod. His body was as tough as a wild beast. He was clearly a strength-type cultivator. People like him had a great advantage in the 9 infants forbidden hunt. Behind this person stood a group of people. They were obviously his companions. "The 5th cultivation room is ours. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and scram." The man gloomily glanced at Nie Tian's group with a face full of disdain as he growled. Sensing this person's aura, the others couldn't help but retreat. "Jiang Qiji, this fellow isn't easy to deal with. Why don't you give it a try?" Standing behind Nie Tian, Gui Wukan chuckled as he spoke to Jiang Qiji. Jiang Qiji sneered and said, "That guy is the captain. Of course, he'll be the one to do it." Lai Yin Jiufeng couldn't help but laugh when he heard Jiang Qiji's words. He said to Nie Tian, "Nie Tian, you're the leader. You go." Nie Tian frowned. Lai Yin Jiufeng really was cunning. He didn't want to do anything himself, but he wanted Nie Tian to do it. Nie Tian's lips curled into a smile as he took a step forward. Glaring at the man, he said coldly, "Make your move." His cold voice was filled with extreme dominance. Up in the sky, Bai Feng and the two people behind him were stunned when they saw this scene. This brat is the captain? The middle-aged man frowned as the disdain on his face deepened. In his opinion, Nie Tian was pure cannon fodder. He was courting death if he wanted to show off with such strength. Let's watch first. Bai Feng smiled bitterly. He had a good impression of Nie Tian. Most importantly, he could see that Nie Tian was very talented. However, he wasn't sure if he should intervene if Nie Tian's life was in danger. At this time, the others had also gathered around. They all wanted to watch a good show. A mere middle god martial practitioner is courting death. The man looked at Nie Tian with extreme disdain. At the same time, there was a trace of joy in his eyes. He could use Nie Tian to intimidate everyone. At this time, the others had also seen Nie Tian's strength. Their eyes were full of disdain. They all thought that Nie Tian was dead for sure. Who's courting death? We'll only know after we fight. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His face was as gloomy as still water. Go to hell. The next moment, the man roared in anger and stomped on the ground. The ground shook and a huge pit appeared. Then, he punched out. The wind from the punch howled as it headed towards Nie Tian. Everyone felt the wind from the punch and couldn't help but step back. Their eyes suddenly burned with passion. It was as if they could already see Nie Tian being smashed into meat paste. Nie Tian stood where he was like an old tree. He didn't move at all. When the fatal punch was about to reach his face, his body moved and he punched out at an unbelievable angle. Bang! The two fists collided. It was like metal colliding with stone. Then, a huge figure was sent flying. A deep ravine was drawn on the ground and blood was dripping down. The sudden scene stunned the crowd. When they saw the figure that was sent flying, they all gasped and felt a chill run down their back. Their fists collided, but the result was completely different from what everyone had expected. The one who was smashed into meat paste wasn't Nie Tian, but the person who had attacked first. The scene fell into a dead silence. The breathing of the crowd could be heard clearly. Many people felt like they were in a dream. They stared at Nie Tian in surprise, as if they were looking at a monster. How is this possible? At the same time, a scream came from the sky. The middle-aged man behind Bai Feng was so shocked that his face turned pale. He had never thought that Nie Tian's martial body would be so strong. Bai Feng's face was also stiff. He was still in shock and couldn't react. At this time, they finally understood why Nie Tian was the leader. At that moment, Nie Tian took a step forward and bellowed, "Get the hell out of here." The guy who was like a pile of mud stood up trembling and looked at Nie Tian in horror. He was no longer as arrogant as before. Who else wants to challenge? Nie Tian suddenly raised his head and glanced at the crowd with a fierce aura. He had injured his opponent with one punch to deter everyone. He wanted to tell them that the fifth cultivation room was theirs. The crowd looked at Nie Tian with fear and couldn't help but whisper, "This guy is so arrogant. He has strength. Of course he can be arrogant. If you think you are stronger than him, then go up and destroy his prestige. This guy's strength is a bit strange. His martial body is too strong." The crowd was talking. For a moment, no one dared to go up to challenge. Since no one dares to challenge, the fifth cultivation room is ours, Nie Tianling said coldly. He turned around and was ready to enter the cultivation room. Wait. At this moment, a bone-chilling voice suddenly rang out. Afterwards, a white-robed figure fell from the sky and landed heavily, kicking up a wave of earth. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he turned around to look at the person. It was an extremely delicate man's face. He was even more beautiful than most women, but his eyes were extremely evil. They gave off a chilling presence. Nie Tian looked at the person and seemed to sense something. His eyes could not help but tremble and his face changed. He cried out inside, "Peek over God!" He could sense that the person before him was a peak over God. He was already one of the strongest among all the competitors. Moreover, the person was not old. He was definitely under 1,000 years old. The talent of a peak over God under 1,000 years old was terrifying. Chapter 1704. The white-robed man stared fixedly at Nyetian. His eyes flickered with coldness. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly. Even though the white-robed man was a peak over God, it was not enough to make him retreat. "Make your move," Nyetianling replied coldly. He stood where he was like a sword. "Humph!" The white-robed man snickered coldly. He then flipped his hand, and a scarlet whirlpool appeared in his palm. It condensed into a dark red dagger. "How is this possible?" Everyone's eyes shook when they saw this, and they all cried out in surprise. This was the outskirts of the Nine Infants mountain range. It was already within the range of the martial restrictions. Everyone's yuan meridians and godheads were suppressed, so they could not use their origin energy or spirit power. However, the white-robed man was able to condense a dagger. It was far too strange. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly, but he soon calmed down. He thought to himself, is it the power of bloodline? Martial Tao restrictions would greatly suppress a cultivator's true meridians and godhead, but for a cultivator who possessed bloodline power, if their bloodline power and martial physique merged together, they would be able to use the power of their bloodline power. Jiang Qiji, for example, could use the heaven-punishing bloodline and activate the heaven-punishing armor even though it was much weaker. Moreover, the pressure of the martial arts restrictions was mainly on the yuan meridians and godhead. A martial artist's other meridians also had a small amount of yuan qi and spirit energy. Relying on these energies, a martial artist could at least fly in the air, but if they wanted to rely on these energies to fight, it would be too weak. Soul transformation bloodline? At this moment, Lai Yanjiufeng's eyes trembled as he cried out softly behind Nyetian. The white-robed man smiled coldly. Then, he swept his gaze across Lai Yanjiufeng and smiled disdainfully. I didn't think that someone would be able to recognize the soul transformation bloodline. What a surprise! The corner of Lai Yanjiufeng's lips curled up. He took a step forward and actually walked up to Nyetian. He said indifferently, "Nyetian, rest first. Let me deal with this guy." Nyetian was stunned. He hadn't expected Lai Yanjiufeng to do something like this. He nodded and retreated to the side. Since Lai Yanjiufeng wanted to fight, he naturally wouldn't stop him. He really wanted to know how strong Lai Yanjiufeng was right now. Actually, what Nyetian wanted to know more was whether the Three Lives Meridian would be suppressed by martial arts restrictions. The Three Lives Meridian was the strongest elemental meridian Nyetian had ever encountered. Nyetian had never seen any power that could suppress the Three Lives Meridians. Barriers, arrays, restrictions, and other such things didn't seem to have any effect on the Three Life Vein. If Lai Yanjiufeng's meridians of 3 lives were completely unaffected by the restrictions of the martial way, then his strength would not be affected at all. If that was the case, then it would be too terrifying. The Soul Formation bloodline is one of the 4 great ancient bloodlines that are as famous as the Xing Tian bloodline. I'd like to see just how strong it is. Lai Yanjiufeng smiled faintly. A hint of evil appeared in his eyes. Nyetian couldn't help but glance at Jiang Qiji. So the Soul Formation bloodline was as famous as the Xing Tian bloodline. No wonder it was so strong. Kid, tell me your name. Hua Bufan's sword does not kill nameless people. The white-robed man also smiled. His killing intent was heavy. Hua Bufan was his name. Lai Yanjiufeng. Lai Yanjiufeng smiled faintly and took a step forward. Balls of strange flames surged out of his body and circulated around him. Power of golden flames! Nyetian exclaimed inside when he saw this. Lai Yanjiufeng was using the power of golden flames in his body directly. The power of golden flames was equivalent to Lai Yanjiufeng's bloodline power. He couldn't tell if the 3 lives meridian was suppressed by the restrictions of the martial way. You have the power of your bloodline as well. Hua Bufan frowned, but then he smiled disdainfully. He said, "It looks like this battle won't be too boring." At this time, many people were paying attention to the battle in the sky. Both of their bloodlines are very powerful. I wonder what the outcome of this battle will be? Bai Feng stared below with bright eyes. He seemed to be a little nervous. If Lai Yin Jiufeng was in danger, he would not hesitate to help. In his eyes, Lai Yin Jiufeng had more potential than Ye Tian. The reason why the Protector cared about the life and death of the contestants was because if these contestants won the Jiu Ying Forbidden Hunt, they would also receive great rewards. Bai Feng had a feeling that Lai Yin Jiufeng was the only one among his 10 subordinates who could win. On the other side, a pair of shining eyes stared at the two below. She was also a little nervous. Gao Yuhan. Bai Feng's eyes trembled when he saw the person. He thought, "I didn't think she would be a protector." The middle-aged woman called Gao Yuhan also noticed Bai Feng, but she only glanced at him indifferently without saying anything. "Kill!" At this time, Hua Bufan growled and stomped on the ground. He charged at Lai Yin Jiufeng like an arrow. Whoosh! The divine blood sword transformed into a bloody glow in the air. A bloody aura surged in the air. Hua Bufan was extremely fast. The sword beam was dozens of meters away, and it was filled with killing intent. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled against Hua Bufan's fatal attack. The power of golden flames around him surged madly, forming a sword of fire. He stabbed straight at Hua Bufan. Bang! The light of fire clashed with the bloody sword beam. There was an explosion in the air, and the smell of blood and fire spread in all directions. The spectators couldn't help but back away. Everyone's eyes trembled. They couldn't imagine that two cultivators who couldn't use their origin energy or spirit power were fighting. Lai Yin Jiufeng and Hua Bufan retreated at the same time and steadied themselves. They stared at each other coldly. Nye Tian's eyes couldn't help but tremble as he exclaimed inwardly, "Those two are so powerful." The battle between Lai Yin Jiufeng and Hua Bufan was even more terrifying than Ye Tian had imagined. He speculated that it would be difficult for him to block Hua Bufan's sword without using the 3 forbidden skills or the tri-evil sword vein. The two then exchanged several blows, but they were equally matched. They failed to hurt each other. Divine transformation bloodline, is that all you've got? Lai Yin Jiufeng smirked disdainfully. How arrogant! Hua Bufan roared angrily and swung his sword again. 2 blood-red swords whistled through the air and flew toward Lai Yin Jiufeng like scarlet snakes. "Watch out!" Luo Zian, who was watching from the side, cried out when she sensed that something was wrong. "It's over," Lai Yin Jiufeng murmured. Then, he thrust his palm forward, and a ray of fire shot out like an arrow let loose. Bang! There was a muffled sound in the next moment. Hua Bufan was sent flying and smashed into the ground, leaving behind a bloody trail several meters long. Chapter 1705. What's going on? A dozen or so seconds later, everyone gasped in unison. They stared at Lai Yin Jiufeng blankly, their eyes filled with deep fear. They had no idea what had just happened. Just now, Extraordinary Hua was the one who attacked first and forced Lai Yin Jiufeng into a corner. But somehow, Lai Yin Jiufeng managed to turn the tables with a casual palm strike. Everyone's eyes trembled. It was as if Lai Yin Jiufeng's Yuan meridians were not affected by the martial restrictions at all. However, they did not believe this at all. They felt that no Yuan meridians could resist such powerful martial restrictions. At this time, Nye Tian's eyes trembled violently and his expression froze. He only recovered after a long time and thought, the vein of 3 lives really can ignore the martial restrictions. In that instant, Nye Tian saw very clearly that Lai Yin Jiufeng had used the vein of 3 lives to defeat Hua Bufan. The vein of 3 lives was too terrifying. It was actually unaffected by the martial restrictions. This made Lai Yin Jiufeng's strength even more terrifying. Out of all the participants of the 9 infant forbidden hunt, only he could use his Yuan meridians and Godhead at will. This advantage was absolutely overwhelming. Nye Tian. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded. She said solemnly, Lai Yin Jiufeng's aura is not the most terrifying. You still have to worry about an enemy even more terrifying than him. Nye Tian frowned and said in shock, Who? He could not think of anyone more terrifying than Lai Yin Jiufeng. The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon. Little Fat Cat's blue eyes flashed. The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon by Lai Yin Jiufeng's side is also unafraid of martial arts restrictions. Its strength is definitely more terrifying than Lai Yin Jiufeng's. This. Nye Tian's expression changed, and he froze for a few seconds. He had almost forgotten that Lai Yin Jiufeng had a Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon beside him. Lai Yin Jiufeng's strength was terrifying enough. With the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon, he was unbeatable in the 9-soul Forbidden Hunt. What kind of power is this? Hua Bufan stood up and stared at Lai Yin Jiufeng with trembling eyes. Even his voice was trembling. He just couldn't understand how Blazing Jiufeng could unleash such terrifying power. I'm sorry, but you don't have the right to know. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled cold and ignored Hua Bufan. He had thought that the soul formation bloodline was very powerful, but he didn't expect it to be so weak. He had already shown mercy with that palm strike just now. Otherwise, Hua Bufan would already be a corpse. Lai Yin Jiufeng didn't take Hua Bufan's life because he was being merciful. He just didn't want to attract unnecessary trouble. Hua Bufan also had a guardian. If he tried to kill him, it was hard to guarantee that the guardian would not save him. Let's go in, Nye Tian. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled faintly before turning around to enter the cultivation room. Nye Tian nodded slightly. He didn't want to waste any more time with these people. Boom. At this moment, a palm shadow suddenly fell from the sky and slammed into the ground, leaving behind a huge crater that was dozens of meters wide. Nye Tian and Lai Yin Jiufeng were stunned at the same time. Then, they turned around and looked at the figure in the sky. Their eyes trembled. The person who had attacked was a black-robed man. He stood in the sky and was shrouded in strange black runes. It was an extremely eerie sight. Another person who doesn't fear the suppression of the martial way's restrictions. Nye Tian screamed in his heart as he looked at the black-robed man with trembling eyes. The man stood in the sky with runes surging around him. He had clearly used a lot of spirit intent power. Everyone's eyes trembled when they saw the black-robed man. They couldn't believe their eyes. You are very strong. Duan Tianhen would like to spar with you. The black-robed man slowly descended and stared at Lai Yin Jiufeng. Lai Yin Jiufeng turned around and looked at Duan Tianhen. He was surprised at first, but then his lips curled into a faint smile. He said, Of course. Lai Yin Jiufeng took a step forward. His eyes were not filled with fear, but with excitement. Lai Yin Jiufeng, he's a paramount god. Be careful, Nye Tian warned Lai Yin Jiufeng. Lai Yin Jiufeng nodded slightly, his eyes filled with confidence. This person is an early paramount god, but it's impossible for him to resist the martial way's restrictions. Nye Tian looked at Duan Tianhen and thought to himself, what kind of power did he use to resist the martial arts restriction? He couldn't understand what Duan Tianhen was using to resist the restrictions. Lai Yin Jiufeng had the meridians of 3 lives, but what did Duan Tianhen rely on? Fat Cat frowned. She seemed to be thinking about something, but she didn't say anything. Duan Tianhen's appearance attracted even more attention. Many protectors showed up, their eyes shining brightly. I'm curious as well. Just what is it that you're using to resist the martial way's restrictions? Lai Yin Jiufeng asked in a cold voice. His eyes were much more serious than before. Duan Tianhen was different from Lai Yin Jiufeng. He wasn't ignoring the restrictions. He was using some kind of power to resist them. You'll find out soon enough. Duan Tianhen's eyes were as cold as ice. He blurred into motion, unleashing countless black magical symbols to form a black claw that slashed toward Lai Yin Jiufeng. Lai Yin Jiufeng frowned. Then, he shook his body and unleashed a sea of fire around him. Boom! In midair, there was a loud sound. The black claw bombarded the sea of flames. Endless flames bloomed and surged in midair, as if the world was about to be set ablaze. The crowd's eyes were trembling, and the shock they felt was written all over their faces. No one could have imagined that the battle would be this intense. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. Duan Tianhen's vital meridians and godhood are being suppressed, he thought. It seems the power inside of him isn't strong enough to resist the martial way's restrictions. Duan Tianhen was an early paramount god. If Lai Yin Jiufeng went all out, there was no way Lai Yin Jiufeng could fight him. What exactly is that power inside of him? Nie Tian looked at the black magical symbols around Duan Tianhen, his eyes trembling. I understand. Fat Cat exclaimed excitedly. This is the power of the Celestial Wind Lightning Seal. The Celestial Wind Lightning Seal? Nie Tian was stunned. He didn't know what Fat Cat was talking about. The power inside of him is the Celestial Wind Lightning Seal. He's using it to resist the martial way's restrictions, Fat Cat exclaimed excitedly. The Celestial Wind Lightning Seal? Nie Tian frowned. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it. It's the fifth seal. Fat Cat calmed down a bit. Her eyes flashed. Nie Tian was stunned, but he quickly realized that the Celestial Wind Lightning Seal was the fifth of the 10 strongest seals. Chapter 1706. The fifth seal, Extreme Wind Lightning Seal. Duan Tianhen's body actually possessed the fifth seal of the 10 great supreme seals. It was no wonder that he could resist the suppression of the martial path restriction. Nie Tian had only heard of the Extreme Wind Lightning Seal before. He had never seen it before. In fact, among the top 10 seals, he had only seen a few that were ranked at the bottom. As for the seals that were ranked at the top, he had never had the chance to see them. Although the 10 great ultimate seals were ranked together, there were still differences in strength. The seals ranked at the top would definitely be stronger than the seals ranked at the bottom. Duan Tianhen could use the power of his Yuan meridians and godheads because of the Extreme Wind Lightning Seal. However, the Extreme Wind Lightning Seal clearly did not completely resist the martial restrictions. Otherwise, Duan Tianhen's strength would be far greater. This did not mean that the Extreme Wind Lightning Seal was weak. It was just that Duan Tianhen's strength had not reached its peak, so he could not unleash its full power. So it's the fifth seal. Interesting. Lai Yin Jiufeng steadied himself and stared coldly at Duan Tianhen. He smiled playfully. You're courting death. Duan Tianhen could feel Lai Yin Jiufeng's disdain. He couldn't help but roar angrily. Then, he gathered wind and lightning, causing the black runes around him to go berserk. A dense, dark cloud actually appeared in the sky. Wind and lightning surged violently within it. What terrifying power! The crowd felt the wind and lightning in the air. Their eyes trembled violently, and they couldn't help but retreat. Nie Tian's gaze also focused. Duan Tianhen's aura was terrifying. The world around him was trembling. Duan Tianhen had displayed such strength despite being suppressed. If it weren't for the martial restrictions, his strength would be unimaginably terrifying. I'll take your life with this palm. Duan Tianhen's lips curled into a smile. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Then, he moved. His entire body went berserk. The dark cloud of wind and lightning behind him pounced like a beast and slammed down on Lai Yin Jiufeng. The crowd's hearts clenched. Their expressions stiffened. Lai Yin Jiufeng's eyes flashed coldly. Then, flames surged out of his body. He was enveloped in a sea of fire. Even the sky behind him was burning. Rumble! In the next moment, the dark cloud of wind and lightning fell into the boundless sea of fire. After a loud explosion, an ear-piercing tearing sound rang out in the air. The terrifying power of wind and lightning and the aura of fire spread out, wreaking havoc in the space. The world surged with the power of wind and lightning. Endless flames danced like snakes. It was extremely terrifying. In that instant, Duan Tianhen and Lai Yen Jiufeng retreated simultaneously and froze in the air. What? The onlookers looked at the two of them and took a deep breath in. They were all shocked to the extreme. Lai Yen Duan Jiufeng, why are you able to ignore the suppression of the martial Dao restriction? Duan Tianhen steadied himself and asked in a deep voice with a cold and domineering look in his eyes. He had Lai Yen Duan Emperor Duan Qi. He had been injured. Duan Tianhen relied on the Wind Thunder Celestial Extreme Seal and could only slightly resist the martial restrictions. However, the blazing 9 peaks completely ignored the martial restrictions. This was too terrifying. It was terrifying. Duan Tianhen could have killed Lai Yen Jiufeng instantly if he hadn't used the Extreme Wind Lightning Seal. The Extreme Wind Lightning Seal is powerful. Lai Yen Jiufeng smiled and wiped away the blood at the corner of his lips. A hint of killing intent flashed through his eyes. He had been injured in the previous clash. Lai Yen Jiufeng finally thought of Duan Tianhen as an opponent. Brat, answer my question. What power do you have? Duan Tianhen roared angrily when he didn't hear the answer he wanted. His entire body trembled, and his eyes shone with killing intent. Sorry, I don't want to tell you. Lai Yen Jiufeng's reaction was very calm. He first smiled, then his eyes darkened. He said, also, you don't have the right to know. You're courting death. Duan Tianhen was enraged. The extreme wind lightning seal around him grew even more violent, and his aura skyrocketed. Lai Yen Jiufeng knew about his extreme wind lightning seal, but he didn't know about Lai Yen Jiufeng's trump card. He was already very angry about this, but Lai Yen Jiufeng's mockery only made him even angrier. You want to fight? Then I'll fight with you. Lai Yen Jiufeng felt Duan Tianhen's aura grow stronger, but he was not afraid at all. The flames on his body burned again, and the sky was filled with a sea of fire. The crowd couldn't help but tremble when they saw this. The 9 neonate forbidden hunt hadn't even started, but these two were going to fight to the death? Lai Yen Jiufeng and Duan Tianhen were the two strongest participants of the 9 neonate forbidden hunt. It was hard to say who would win in this fight to the death. Nie Tian frowned. He felt that Lai Yen Jiufeng had the upper hand. After all, he still had the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon he hadn't used yet. However, Lai Yen Jiufeng didn't seem to want to use the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon. The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon was Lai Yen Jiufeng's strongest trump card. He wouldn't use it unless he had no other choice. Make your move. The Extreme Wind Lightning Seal isn't just this. Lai Yen Jiufeng took a step forward. Flames burned all over his body, but there was no fear in his eyes. There was only the strongest fighting spirit. Brat, you asked for it. Duan Tianhen sneered. The terrifying power of wind and lightning rumbled around him, as if it wanted to devour the world. The two of them were extremely powerful. They refused to give in to each other. A battle was about to break out. Stop! At this moment, a low, angry roar suddenly resounded in the sky. Then, a figure descended. It was Bai Feng. It's the Protector. Nie Tian abruptly raised his head. His gaze tense. He didn't think that Bai Feng would appear at this time. Lai Yen Jiufeng frowned slightly when he saw Bai Feng. Then, he laughed and the flames around him disappeared. Duan Tianhen looked at Bai Feng, but his eyes remained focused. He didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. What? Do you still want to fight? Bai Feng looked at Duan Tianhen and said coldly. I do. Duan Tianhen answered very decisively. Then, he looked at Lai Yen Jiufeng and pointed at a high platform in the distance. He said, Brat, do you dare to fight me in the arena of life and death? The arena of life and death. Everyone was stunned. Then, they looked at the high platform in the distance with trembling eyes. The arena of life and death was a place where cultivators fought to the death. Once they entered the arena of life and death, Not even the protector could interfere. Lai Yin Jiufeng's eyes narrowed slightly, and his lips curled into a strange smile. Then, he looked at Duan Tianhen and said indifferently, I originally didn't want to kill you, but you can't blame me if you insist on dying. How arrogant! Duan Tianhen roared angrily. Then, he flew toward the arena of life and death. Bang! However, at this moment, a strange power suddenly fell from the sky. Then, there was a muffled sound, and Duan Tianhen's body swayed. He fell to the ground like a boulder. Chapter 1707. This sudden scene caused everyone to be stunned. Then, they looked up at the purple-robed figure in the sky, and their eyes trembled violently. Duan Tianhen was very powerful, but he was defeated by the lady in purple in one move. What was even more strange was that no one saw how the lady in purple attacked. Everyone was within the martial path restriction. The aura of the martial path restriction would only weaken when they were 30,000 meters in the sky. The lady in purple seemed to have ignored the martial path restriction. Under the martial path restriction, even a martial artist like Bai Feng might not be Duan Tianhen's match. But the lady in purple was completely different. She defeated Duan Tianhen in one move. Gao Yuhan. Bai Feng suddenly lifted his head and looked at the lady in purple. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. The person who attacked was the person he had been paying attention to, Gao Yuhan. Bai Feng did not expect that with Gao Yuhan's status, why would she come to the Jiu Ying forbidden hunting area to be a guardian? Nie Tian looked at Gao Yuhan in the sky. His eyes trembled and his expression froze. Nie Tian, she. Rui Qianyu stood behind Nie Tian. She seemed to have realized something. Her face froze and she couldn't say a word. Rainbow pupils. At the same time, Little Fat Cat's voice rang out in surprise. That's right. Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu realized at the same time that the lady in purple, Gao Yuhan, was a martial artist with rainbow pupils. Rainbow pupils. Could she be the martial artist with 9 colored pupils that Sun Luo's 7 knights mentioned? After a few seconds, Nie Tian calmed down and thought to himself in surprise. Sun Luo Chia had also participated in the 9 infant forbidden hunt 200,000 years ago. He had met a martial artist with rainbow pupils who had opened their 7th pupil. It was very likely that she was this lady in purple. Gao Yuhan had used rainbow pupils to defeat Duan Tianhen in one move. Rainbow pupils completely ignored the martial path restriction. Nie Tian didn't know how many of Gao Yuhan's 9 colored pupils had opened, but judging from the way she fought, she was far more powerful than Raindrop Qianye. Guardian! Guardian! At this moment, Duan Tianhen stood up. His expression was extremely ugly, and his voice was trembling. Gao Yuhan didn't even look at Duan Tianhen as she coldly said, Today's matter ends here. Her voice was not loud, but it sounded like a clap of thunder in everyone's ears. Duan Tianhen's eyes trembled. He was extremely unwilling, but he didn't dare to say anything else. Putting aside the fact that Gao Yuhan was Duan Tianhen's guardian, just her strength alone was enough to shut Duan Tianhen up. Thank you, my lady. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled faintly and bowed to Gao Yuhan in thanks. There's no need to thank me. I'm just saving Duan Tianhen, Gao Yuhan said coldly as she swept her gaze across Lai Yin Jiufeng. Save Duan Tianhen? The crowd couldn't help but be stunned when they heard this. In Gao Yuhan's opinion, Duan Tianhen wasn't Lai Yin Jiufeng's match at all. If Duan Tianhen and Lai Yin Jiufeng were to fight on the arena of life and death, Duan Tianhen would definitely be the one to die. You think too highly of me, my lady. If we were to fight on the arena of life and death, it's hard to say who would win. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled slightly, but it felt like he was provoking Gao Yuhan. Gao Yuhan ignored Lai Yin Jiufeng. She knew very well how strong he was. Duan Tianhen looked at Lai Yin Jiufeng hatefully, but he was puzzled. Why was Gao Yuhan so sure that he wasn't Lai Yin Jiufeng's match? Then, the crowd slowly dispersed. After Lai Yin Jiufeng had displayed his strength, No one dared to fight for the 5th cultivation room anymore. Thank you for helping, Lady Gao. Bai Feng walked up to Gao Yuhan and bowed slightly. His attitude was respectful. Gao Yuhan wasn't just stronger than Bai Feng, her status in Jiuying Heaven was also much higher. Therefore, Bai Feng was naturally respectful. If Gao Yuhan hadn't helped just now, Bai Feng really didn't know what would have happened. However, Bai Feng was very puzzled. Why was Gao Yuhan so sure that Duan Tianhen wasn't Lai Yin Jiufeng's match? Gao Yuhan had the 9-color eyes. Maybe she saw something. Gao Yuhan nodded slightly and didn't say anything. Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu looked at Gao Yuhan. They hesitated for a moment, but in the end, they didn't say anything. They turned around and prepared to enter the cultivation room. Wait! It was at this moment Gao Yuhan's voice suddenly rang. Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu froze and turned around at the same time. Come with me. I have something to say to you, Gao Yuhan said indifferently while staring at Rui Qianyu. Rui Qianyu couldn't help but look at Nie Tian in surprise. She didn't know whether she should go or not. Qianyu, go with this lady. Nie Tian thought for a moment and smiled. I'll wait for you here. Gao Yuhan must have noticed Rui Qianyu's 9-color eyes. That was why she was interested in the latter. Nie Tian could tell that Gao Yuhan was not a sinister person despite her cold appearance. Rui Qianyu would be safe if she left with her. Amen. Rui Qianyu nodded slightly and left with Gao Yuhan. Bai Feng frowned when he saw the two of them. He thought to himself, what's wrong with Gao Yuhan? Why is she suddenly so warm to a stranger? Gao Yuhan was famous for being as cold as ice in 9 Infants' Heaven. But today, she first saved Duan Tianhen and then took Rui Qianyu away. It was a little strange. Bai Feng shook his head and left without saying a word. Nie Tian stood outside the cultivation room and waited patiently for Rui Qianyu. A thought suddenly occurred to Nie Tian, and he asked with a smile, Little fatty, since the Heavenly Wind Thunder Seal can resist martial arts restrictive spells, does that mean my 3 evil sword vein can also resist martial arts restrictive spells? Duan Tianhen's Wind and Thunder Seal could resist martial way prohibition, but Nie Tian's Tri-Evil Sword range was a combination of 3 sword seals. Moreover, the power of each sword seal was comparable to the 10 strongest seals. Therefore, the Tri-Evil Sword range was definitely stronger than the Wind and Thunder Seal. Could it also resist martial way prohibition? Yes, it can. Fat Cat chuckled and curled his lip. The Tri-Evil Sword range is indeed stronger than the Wind and Thunder Seal, but your strength is far inferior to Duan Tianhen's. Even he can only resist martial way prohibition a little. Given your strength, even the Tri-Evil Sword range can't resist martial way prohibition. Nie Tian's face darkened. He was only a peak middle god while Duan Tianhen was an early paramount god. The gap was too big. The Tri-Evil Sword range was strong, but Nie Tian was too weak. He couldn't unleash the full power of the Tri-Evil Sword range, so he couldn't resist martial way prohibition. Sigh, this is troublesome. Nie Tian couldn't help but sigh with worry. Lai Yin Jiufeng was already troublesome, and now Duan Tianhen had appeared. This made Nie Tian feel a great threat. Even if Nie Tian used his 3 great forbidden skills, he didn't have absolute confidence in defeating Lai Yin Jiufeng and Duan Tianhen. Chapter 1708. God-Fiend Vital Embryo? Nie Tian was taken aback. Can the God-Fiend Vital Embryo resist the martial way seal? Perhaps. Fat Cat chuckled. You'll know when you try. Nie Tian was taken aback again. It seemed like Fat Cat was only guessing and was not very sure. He looked around. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, he let out a breath of turbid air. With a thought, 16 streams of God-Fiend energies were released from his body and surged within him. Just as the God-Fiend energies were released, something strange happened. Nie Tian suddenly felt that the dragon vein and demonic aura that had been tightly suppressed in his body had loosened a little. He could actually circulate them. The Godfiend vital embryo can really resist the martial way seal. Nye Tian immediately understood and exclaimed in his heart. The release of 16 streams of Godfiend energies eased the pressure on his dragon vein and demonic aura. At least they could circulate. Nye Tian, quickly retract the Godfiend energies. Fat Cat reminded Nye Tian. It would be bad if the Godfiend vital embryo was exposed. Nye Tian retracted the Godfiend energies. His eyes glowed as he exclaimed, "Such terrifying Godfiend energies! They can actually resist the martial way seal." At this moment, Nye Tian finally understood how terrifying the Godfiend energies were. He had only awakened 16 streams of 9,000 Godfiend energies, and he could already resist such a terrifying martial way seal. If all 9,000 Godfiend energies were awakened, how terrifying would his strength be? It's impossible for your dragon vein and demonic aura to circulate normally with 16 streams of Godfiend energies. Fat Cat was very calm. Before the 9 neonate forbidden hunt begins, you must raise your strength to that of an upper deity and awaken more Godfiend energies. Only then will you have the ability to fight Blazing Jiufeng head-on. Yes. Nye Tian nodded heavily. The 9 neonate forbidden hunt would begin in 10 days. He was very confident that he could raise his strength within 10 days. Confirming that the power of gods and demons could resist martial path restrictions, Nye Tian was very happy. He could not wait to start cultivating. After a while, Rui Qinyu appeared alone. Gao Yuhan did not follow her. "Qianye, are you alright?" Nye Tian could not help but ask when he saw Rui Qinyu frowning as if she was worried about something. "I'm fine." Rui Qinyu shook her head slightly and forced a smile, but the worry in her eyes could not be concealed. "What happened? What did that lord say to you?" Nye Tian frowned and asked anxiously. Rui Qinyu thought for a while and said, "Master Gao told me not to activate the 9 color pupils again, and I'm not allowed to use it in the Jiu-Ing forbidden hunt." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. He couldn't understand why Gao Yuhan would do that. What else did she say? Nye Tian became cold and continued to ask. Rui Qinyu frowned and said, "Master Gao said that the Jiu-Ing hunting forbidden hunt is far more complicated than what we see." Nye Tian was stunned again. What did Gao Yuhan mean? Why did she say this to Rui Qinyu? "Qianye, don't worry too much. Ever since the Jiu-Ing hunting forbidden hunt started, we have been together. I won't let anything happen to you," Nye Tian said in a deep voice. His eyes were extremely determined. Gao Yuhan was obviously hinting something to Rui Qinyu. There might be something else behind the Jiu-Ing hunting forbidden hunt. No matter what, Nye Tian would protect Rui Qinyu. He would not let anything happen to her. Then, Nye Tian and Rui Qinyu did not say anything else and immediately entered the cultivation room to cultivate. After entering the cultivation room, Nye Tian sat cross-legged and entered into a state of cultivation. The spirit energy in the cultivation room was very dense. There was also a special formation that could allow a martial artist's Yuan meridians and godhead to operate normally. 3 days later, Nye Tian woke up from his cultivation state. His eyes were filled with a sharp light. In just 3 days, he had successfully achieved a breakthrough and advanced to early-stage high god. For other martial artists, advancing from mid-stage to high god wasn't a qualitative change. Advancing from low stage to high god was actually just a strengthening of the godhead. It wouldn't make a qualitative leap in a martial artist's strength. But for Nye Tian, advancing from mid-stage to high god was a huge improvement because of the primal star stone in his body. Advancing to high god allowed Nye Tian to open the 7th layer of the galaxy. At the same time, the primal star stone awakened 700 billion stars. The awakening of the stars strengthened Nye Tian's martial body once again. At the same time, all the abilities of the primal star stone were greatly enhanced. The 7th layer of the galaxy has opened. Let's see what's inside. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth curled up. His eyes burned with passion. Inside the primal star stone, every time a layer of the galaxy was opened, something extremely powerful would appear. From the first to the sixth layer, there were Sky Shrouding Totem, Starry Eye Hellfire Crucible, Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique, Starry Sky Sword Formation, and Starry Sky Forbidden Space. He wondered what would appear in the seventh layer of the galaxy. Nye Tion's consciousness entered the seventh layer of the galaxy. Above the galaxy, stars twinkled and sparkled. The air was filled with an abnormally powerful aura of life, as though a powerful life was being nurtured. Nye Tion suddenly raised his head. With a thought, the galaxy sensed his will. The endless starlight suddenly turned violent and began to converge. The starlight surged and condensed, first forming a vortex. Then, the countless vortexes began to collide with each other, releasing a terrifying power. Looking at the scene before him, Nye Tion's entire person became sluggish. He could feel the entire seventh layer of the galaxy shaking violently, as though it would collapse at any moment. After a long time, the countless vortexes of starlight merged together, forming a sea of starlight. The sea of starlight was surging with an extremely strong power of the stars. Nye Tion frowned as he sensed the power of the stars in the sea of starlight. Boom! In the next moment, the sea of starlight suddenly trembled. Then, a terrifying power surged out, slowly rising up. Suddenly, endless power of the stars was released. The power slowly surged, and gradually condensed into the shape of a sword. Huh! Nye Tion frowned, his eyes flashing. Immediately, endless vortexes of starlight were released. Like flames, they continuously attacked the sword of starlight, continuously polishing it. Forging a sword? Nye Tion was stunned. The scene in front of him was clearly the scene of a swordsmith polishing a sword. After a while, the sword of starlight became brighter and brighter. The power of the stars within it also became more and more violent, gradually condensing into a solid form. Nye Tion was stunned by the scene in front of him. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. After a while, the sword of starlight completely condensed into a solid form, releasing resplendent starlight. At the same time, it crazily absorbed the power of the stars in the sea of starlight. The sea of starlight quickly disappeared, and the sword of starlight soared into the sky. A terrifying sword intent soared into the sky, disappearing into the endless galaxy. Chapter 1709. In the Star River domain, in the seventh layer of the Star River, a sharp sword shining with starlight stood erect, as if to declare that it was the ruler of this part of the world. Starlight Heaven Slash! Nye Tion looked at the sharp sword in the starry sky, his eyes trembling and shining. He had never expected that a sword would appear in the seventh layer of the Milky Way. Nye Tion was in need of a sword that was suitable for him. The sword Absolute Heaven Slash had accompanied him for 2 lifetimes, but now it was not as strong as he wanted it to be. As Nye Tion's strength and sword principal realm increased, every time he used the sword Absolute Heaven Slash, he would be careful and deliberately separate a part of the sword essence to protect the body of the sword Absolute Heaven Slash. His sword essence was already very strong, and the sword Absolute Heaven Slash could not withstand it when he used it with all his strength. He had already been thinking about changing to a sword that was more suitable for him. After the sword Absolute Heaven Slash had been upgraded several times, the body of the sword was damaged, and it would be difficult to upgrade it again. The Starlight Heaven Slash appeared at the right time, and Nye Tion was overjoyed. Buzz! At this moment, the Starlight Heaven Slash let out a clear sword cry, and the sound lingered in the Milky Way. Endless starlight flowed and surged in the space, shining brightly. Nye Tion's mind moved, and his divine sense left the seventh layer of the Milky Way. At the same time, the Starlight Heaven Slash appeared in his hand. He took a step out of the cultivation room. Starlight Heaven Slash, not bad. Nye Tion looked at the sword of starlight in his hand, and felt the surging sword essence in it. The corner of his mouth rose into a faint smile. He suddenly realized that the sword body of the Starlight Heaven Slash was surprisingly similar to the sword Absolute Heaven Slash. He flipped his palm, and the sword Absolute Heaven Slash appeared in his hand. He observed it carefully, and his eyes trembled. The Starlight Heaven Slash and the sword Absolute Heaven Slash were exactly the same. What's going on? Nyetian was stunned, and did not know how to react. It's very simple. At that moment, the fat cat's voice rang out, the Star Raw Stone has already fused with you, so when the Star Heaven Slash was forged, it was naturally based on the sword Absolute Heaven Slash. Feel it carefully, and see if the sword intent in the Star Heaven Slash is the same as the one in your body. Nyetian was stunned at first, but soon after, he carefully sensed the star's heaven chop, and his expression slowly turned into one of shock. He was shocked to discover that when the sword intent in his body changed, the sword intent in the Starlight Heaven Slash would also change. His sword intent and the Starlight Heaven Slash's sword intent maintained absolute synchronization. That's amazing! Nyetian exclaimed, his face aghast. The reason why sword spirit swordsmen were stronger than ordinary swordsmen was because the sword spirit could sense the swordsman's sword intent and maintain a connection with the swordsman's sword intent. This allowed the swordsman's sword moves to display greater power. For a swordsman who was not a sword spirit, even if the attribute of the sword was the same as the attribute of the sword intent, it was not easy to achieve absolute synchronization. At this time, Starlight Heaven Slash was equivalent to Nyetian's sword spirit. The attribute of the power of the stars could be changed at any time, so Starlight Heaven Slash was better than ordinary sword spirit. The raw star stone had sensed Nyetian's sword intent, so it created Starlight Heaven Slash. Even its name was similar to the sword Absolute Heaven Slash, so it should have been influenced by the sword Absolute Heaven Slash. Starlight Heaven Slash. This is completely the upgraded sword Absolute Heaven Slash. Nyetian understood everything, smiled faintly, and then put the two swords together. In the next moment, a miraculous scene occurred. The sword body of the sword Absolute Heaven Slash actually began to crack inch by inch, waves of sword intent gushed out, transforming into sword light that entered the Starlight Heaven Slash. The sword was the swordsman's second life. A sword that had been with the swordsman for too long would also be able to understand the swordsman's thoughts. The sword Absolute Heaven Slash disintegrated itself, transforming into sword intent that fused into the Starlight Heaven Slash. This was the result of its connection with Nyetian's mind. Nyetian watched as the sword Absolute Heaven Slash in his hand slowly disappeared. He couldn't help but be moved. He said in a deep voice, "Sword Absolute Heaven Slash, my old friend, thank you for your choice. Let us continue to fight side by side." The sword Absolute Heaven Slash disappeared and fused with the Starlight Heaven Slash. In another form, it stayed by Nyetian's side, fighting alongside him against the world. With the Starlight Heaven Slash, Nyetian's combat strength had greatly increased. This gave him even more confidence in fighting against Lian Jiufeng and Duan Tianhen. Nyetian put away the Starlight Heaven Slash and sensed the God-fiend nascent embryo. His strength had risen to early-stage high god realm, and his God-fiend nascent embryo had awakened another 16 streams of God-fiend energy. Adding the 16 streams of God-fiend energy he had awakened before, he now had a total of 32 streams of God-fiend energy. 32 streams of God-fiend energy should be more effective against the suppression of martial arts restrictions, muttered Nyetian with a faint smile. The power of God-fiend energy was resistant to martial arts restrictions. He wondered how much of Nyetian's strength could be unleashed with 32 streams of God-fiend energy. There's still some time before the start of the hunting ban. It's time to check out the 9-infant mountain range, smiled Nyetian as he looked at the mountain range in the distance. At this time, most of the people were cultivating in the cultivation rooms. Nie Tian planned to enter the 9-infant mountain range to take a look. Although there were still 7 days, Nie Tian knew that his strength would not increase even if he continued to cultivate. He might as well explore the 9-infant mountain range first. Familiarizing himself with the 9-infant mountain range in advance would greatly benefit him during the 9-infant forbidden hunt. Nie Tian entered the cultivation room and looked at Rui Qianyu. The latter was still cultivating, so he did not disturb her. It was safer for Rui Qianyu to stay in the cultivation room. Nie Tian did not waste any time and sprinted toward the 9-infant mountain range. Entering the mountain range, Nie Tian slowed down and carefully sensed his surroundings. The 9-infant mountain range was not much different from the other mountain ranges. The only difference was that the trees were taller and more lush. However, Nie Tian felt that there was an eerie aura in the air. There was even a hint of blood in the air, which made him feel uncomfortable. He continued forward and soon arrived at a canyon. Nie Tian looked around and muttered, "This canyon is not bad. It's a good place to hide." The start of the 9-infant forbidden hunt would definitely be a bloody massacre. If he could find a good hiding place, he could at least avoid many unnecessary battles. Nie Tian did not plan to kill anyone. He only wanted to ensure that he did not die and that he could live until the end. He memorized the location of the canyon in front of him and turned to leave. Roar! Just at this moment, a low roar suddenly sounded, followed by a gust of cold wind blowing against his face. Nie Tian frowned and suddenly turned around. He saw a huge figure appear on the cliff above the canyon. It was a huge black tiger. It was around 10 meters long and was completely black. Only its 2 eyes shone brightly and flickered with a bloodthirsty light. Nie Tian could not help but tremble when he felt the aura of the huge black tiger. He guessed that this huge tiger was roughly equivalent to a rank 6 mythological beast. Its strength was equivalent to a peak superior god. However, the biggest advantage of a mythological beast was its strong body. If a warrior could not use his yuan power or spirit power, he would need to be at least a peak overgod to fight a rank 6 mythological beast. Nie Tian looked at the huge black tiger in front of him. There was not fear in his eyes, but a strong desire to fight. Chapter 17:10. A man and a tiger faced off in the valley of the 9-infants mountain range. Roar! The black tiger seemed to sense the disdain in Nie Tian's eyes, so it suddenly roared out furiously. Afterwards, it leapt into the air and lunged towards Nie Tian like a small mountain. Swish! The black tiger extended its claws and a sharp, cold light immediately appeared in the air. It whistled towards Nie Tian. The martial restrictions of the 9-infants mountain range mainly targeted the energy meridians and godheads of cultivators, so it did not suppress divine beasts. Nie Tian stomped his foot heavily when he saw this. Instead of retreating, he directly charged over. Bang! The boulder beneath his feet suddenly shattered with a muffled sound. Spurt! In the next moment, the cold light fell from the sky and directly left behind a bone-deep wound on Nie Tian's chest. Blood immediately spurted out. Almost at the same time, Nie Tian punched out and heavily hit the huge black tiger's head. The huge tiger let out a low roar and let out a miserable howl. Its huge body immediately stagnated and was directly sent flying. It heavily smashed into a huge boulder, and the boulder shattered with a loud bang. Roar! The black tiger directly leapt up after landing on the ground. It stared at Nie Tian with its bloodshot eyes as a sliver of blood flowed from the corner of its mouth. What a beast! Its body is so tough. Nie Tian moved and landed on a huge boulder. The wound on his chest continued to bleed, but the battle intent in his eyes burned even brighter. Nie Tian had used his full strength in the punch earlier. If it were a regular peak overgod, they would definitely be slain by the punch if they did not use any defenses and only relied on the defenses of their martial body. However, the black tiger's body was clearly much tougher than a peak overgod's martial body. It only suffered some light injuries from Nie Tian's punch. Roar! The black tiger became furious. It suddenly leapt up and extended its claws again, swiping towards Nietian. Perfect! Nietian snickered and didn't dodge. Instead, he used his body to resist the sharp claws of the black tiger. Bang! Bang! Two muffled sounds rang out as a man and a tiger collided with each other before separating. Two more wounds appeared on Nietian's body, and the giant black tiger's mouth was crooked from the beating. If anyone saw the battle between Nietian and the black tiger, they would be shocked speechless. It was hard to imagine that a martial artist who had just become a high god could have such a powerful martial body that he could fight a rank 6 divine beast head-on and not be at a disadvantage. Bang! 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 Then, with a few more muffled sounds, Nietian and the huge black tiger collided a few more times, and both of them were injured. This beast's body is really strong. It seems that if I don't use some tricks, it will be very difficult to kill it. Nietian frowned and the coldness in his eyes intensified. If he only relied on his martial body, he could also kill the black tiger. However, he would have to pay a price. Nietian, stop playing around. The smell of blood here is too strong. If it attracts other divine beasts, it will be terrible. At this time, Fat Cat's voice rang out, reminding Nietian that he had arrived. Okay. Nietian's mouth twitched, and Star's Heaven Slash appeared in his hand. This was the first time he used Star's Heaven Slash, so he couldn't miss. The moment Star's Heaven Slash appeared, a glaring sword ray shot out and filled the entire canyon. Roar! The black tiger growled, as if it had sensed danger, and it couldn't help but retreat. One sword, I will end you. Nietian's mouth twitched, and then his body moved, and he attacked crazily with his sword. The sword intent surged, and the sword ray shot out towards the black tiger. The black tiger sensed danger, and it let out a mournful howl. It turned around and wanted to run, but it was too late. The moment the sword ray landed, the black tiger's body was split in half. What a sharp sword! Nietian's body landed, and he couldn't help but frown, and his face was full of surprise. The power of this sword was more terrifying than he had expected. The black tiger's body was very strong, but it couldn't withstand the sharpness of Star's Heaven Slash, and it was killed in one strike. The martial way restriction had a strong suppressive force on Nietian's 9 dragon veins, but it had little effect on his 10th origin vein, Raw Star Stone. From this, it could be seen that the 10th origin vein was much stronger than the Supreme Dragon vein. The 900 billion star power of the Raw Star Stone had not been fully awakened, and its true power was far from being unleashed. After killing the black tiger, Nietian immediately put away Star's Heaven Slash, and then he took a step forward and took out the divine core from the tiger's body. Roar, roar! At this moment, Nietian suddenly heard a low roar, and he couldn't help but smile. Then, with a thought, a small golden beast appeared in front of him. It was Jean Tuesday. At this moment, Jean Tu's body was already more than a meter long, and it didn't look as cute as before. Instead, it looked fierce. Little guy, do you want this divine core? Nietian raised the divine core in his hand and couldn't help but laugh. Roar, roar, roar. Jean Tu nodded its head and roared excitedly. Nietian looked at the divine core in his hand and murmured, "This divine core contains extremely violent power. With Jean Tu's current strength, can he withstand this power?" "Don't worry, Jean Tu is much stronger than you think," Fat Cat appeared and said with a smile. Nietian nodded slightly, and then he threw the divine core in his hand. Jean Tu jumped up and swallowed the divine core. The moment the divine core entered its body, Jean Tu's body shook slightly. Then, it released a golden light and its body actually became slightly bigger. This! Nietian was stunned. He didn't expect Jean Tu to be so terrifying. It could directly swallow a divine core and instantly absorb some of its power. Jean Tu's eyes flashed a few times, and then it moved and returned to the spiritual pet ring. This is the first time this little guy has swallowed a divine core, so it's normal for its strength to increase a little. However, it's still young, so it shouldn't swallow too many divine cores. Otherwise, it'll be detrimental to its growth in the future. Fat Cat shook its head and smiled, and then it disappeared. Nye Tian nodded and smiled. Jin 2's strength is probably not weak now. It's a little weaker than the black tiger you just killed. Fat Cat's voice sounded again, and then it disappeared completely. Nye Tian was stunned, and couldn't say anything for a long time. The black tiger was a 6th-rank divine beast, and Jin 2 was so small, but it already had the strength of a 6th-rank divine beast. This was too terrifying. As expected of an ancient, ferocious beast. Nye Tian reacted after a long time. He glanced around and didn't stay any longer. He turned around and left. Just as he walked out of the canyon, Nye Tian couldn't help but frown. He sensed that there was a figure in front of him that was madly rushing towards him. It seems that I'm not the only one who wants to explore the Jiuying mountain range. Nye Tian murmured and smiled. He didn't want to disturb the other party, so he prepared to go around to avoid unnecessary trouble. However, at this moment, he seemed to have sensed something, and his expression changed. Immediately, he activated the holographic divine rune and spread out his divine sense, locking onto the madly running figure.